most time you see a car get strapped down, it picks up 50 horse. Maybe you get some Hero and it picks up 150, but this thing picked up 500 or better every hit. You know, my buddy was doing some Pikes Peak stuff. Oh, it's way down on power. I'm like, I mean, at 8,000 feet elevation, I'm sure it is. I'll get after it harder. You know, I send him a tune-up and I label it, bring a trailer. You know?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Minnoxide podcast. I'm your host, Harris, aka Minnoxide, man of many automotive aspirations, and I'm here with my Ford-loving co-host, Dan, Mr. Gun at Garage.
Yep.
There's not a Ford in here, is there?
No, but I feel of all the crew we've been hanging out with, these are the most Ford guys I've gotten to hang out with so far. So they seem to like to put a Coyote in about anything, so I'm fine with that.
And today we're at A-Star Fabrication. Doesn't matter.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, and today we got Alex Chud and then Andy McPherson on. So some of the internet may be familiar with your build, and then obviously you've competed as well. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll start with you, and then we can kind of just go from there.
My name is Andy McPherson. I'm the owner of A-Star Fabrication here. I got my roots, we'll say. I did my first Honda swap in 1996 and kind of just been at it ever since.
Okay.
So,
and then, we'll do a quick intro of you as well.
Yeah, I'm terrible at this, so.
Yeah. No, who are you? What do you drive? And all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Alex Chud. I own a company called AlloyWerx. Used to be called Budget Billet. We do all the DI block-offs for the LTs and Coyotes, some Hemi intakes, and other small billet parts. You may know my vehicle or my truck. I have the 19 F150 that we took to the sand dunes on some super scoops. Was at PRI last year in street mode, and then this year in sand mode.
Okay. So I got familiar with your truck. The video I first saw it was you leaving PRI doing that wicked burnout.
Yep. Yeah, we had the super scoops ratchet strapped to the back of it. When we got there, we were able to load in right there at the docks. And when we were leaving, we were not going to wait in line for multiple hours to get out. So I went over to do you know what the name of the strap company is that's always there? I don't know. They're always at PRI. And I bought some straps, and we just strapped to the back of the chassis and then went out of there. I don't know if I was allowed to do the burnout, but...
Did you get a ticket or an email?
No.
Oh, good to go then.
Yeah, good to go.
Well then, okay, so you've been at this for quite some time then yourself. So you said your first build was in 96?
yeah, I did my first B-Series swap in 96 and kind of stuck with the Honda stuff. Almost Honda, solely Honda probably for 10 or 15 years. And not to be rude to you Honda guys, but the money into a Honda kind of fell off real bad. The stuff was real cheap for a long time, and we kind of found our niche in the Evo market for a while. We still do a lot of Honda stuff. I'll say the people still in the Honda game that have been in it for a long time at this point are a little bit older, a little more seasoned, a little more willing to build a serious car at this point. So we still do a bunch of Honda stuff, and I mean we'll branch off into anything. You know, I get a little picky on, you know, what we tune, what ECU, stuff like that. So I mean we kind of still stay in a niche market, but like, I mean, walking around you see LS, LT, Coyote stuff, you know.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of variety here. And I was telling Dan yesterday, like, I feel like I just fell into a time warp. There was nothing here newer than like 2010, I think.
Yeah, no, I being honest, I don't like working on new stuff. So, you know, almost every car in the shop is a 100% rewire on standalone. So, you know, it gets difficult, and, you know, not a lot of people like say, you know, like even when Alex not just first came in, but, you know, when he's like, hey, what would it take to put a standalone on, you know, my 19 F150, and, you know, you tell somebody like, you know, without blinking an eye, like 10 or 15 grand to rewire a car, put an ECU, digital display, stuff like that in, usually they're on their way back out the door instantaneously because of, you know, HP tuners or something else like that they may be more used to or more accustomed to. We stay away from any stock ECU tuning. So we'll just say for the average person looking to rewire a car or put it on a standalone, generally speaking, it's mainly older vehicles, we'll say.
Well, it has to be, because nowadays you can't even, everything is so wired together and you just take one thing off and the whole rest of the car doesn't work.
Like this is literally what we did is I literally told him to go home and unplug the PCM, and because Ford, right? I know some weird stuff with Explorers and stuff like that, and having to constantly, window programming problems or whatever, or just crashing the can in general.
Yep.
So I just told him to go home and unplug the PCM, and whatever doesn't work, it probably never will again. There's a chance that, we figure out and write a custom can stream for it. So I just sold like a 2009 Porsche Cayman S that had a Honda K Series in it, and we were communicating back and forth on CAN. So we had the factory gauge cluster working, ABS back working with like a Link ECU.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of, I won't name another brand, but a lot of other manufacturers will say would lock the CAN. So you're never going to talk to the factory car with just say Holly, right? Maybe it will eventually or whatever. Maybe, they offer something for this gen Camaro through some gateway or something, but it's not going to, most ECUs aren't going to natively openly talk or communicate with not even just a modern car, anything with CAN, so there's not me, I'm not smart enough, but I've got some friends and customers that can sniff out CAN on a newer vehicle, supply me with data, or at least help me get on a roll so that we can at least get back the gauge cluster, get the car functioning again, on a standalone. But again, once you have to add that into the cost, your average, blower Mustang or Z01 Camaro, they're not looking to do that. They're just looking to do a pulley swap, even if they're doing piston rod cam, something like that. They're not really looking to build a race car, so, and yeah, a lot of this stuff is still a street car. We'll say the import world might be a little different. It seems, easy to sell a Evo customer a standalone ECU when, yes, you can tune the stock PCM. We just don't.
Right.
We just instantly make the move. We're going to put whatever plug and play ECU in it, whether it be Link or something else. And
is that your go-to, Link?
Link is for sure my go-to.
Okay.
Yeah. So
when did you get involved with using that? Has that always been the case, or?
No. So I had a long-time relationship with AEM. I was sponsored, we'll say, back in the AEM V1, V2 kind of turnover, whatever this would be, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And I really tried to stick it out with AEM for a long time. Wasn't too fond of the Infinity switchover. Mm-hmm. Never really found my niche in that. So long story short, I had tuned a couple Link ECUs, and a buddy of mine became Link ECU tech support for US, and then helped kind of expand the Link brand in US, and brought a couple of the guys over from New Zealand, and we kind of struck a deal, and they sponsored me a ECU and a digital dash for one of my Evos. So, and just like anything else, learning curve, I fell hard on it, and eventually, after many hours, kind of figured it out and never turned back. And again, I like it because it's more open and easy to manipulate. You're not less constrained than a lot of other stuff that I've tuned. So
that makes sense.
It's been our go-to. So that's why when Alex asked, hey, I'm interested in putting a standalone in my 19 F150, well, I think this was the first Gen 3 Coyote motor on a standalone in the world that we know of. So I'm like, well, it'll run the engine. He was on a 10-speed trans at the time, and I was like, well, sure, eventually we could maybe control that transmission. but not easily right off the rip. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, go put a turbo 400 in the car and,
Right.
I'll wire it up, and being honest, I thought this would never happen. And he says, okay, what do you need? And walks out to the car and drops me a deposit. We ordered some parts and, wired it up.
Tons of custom stuff.
Yeah, tons of custom stuff later.
Yeah.
A couple, a little crank sensor and custom cam sensors in it. Got it running. So,
So how'd you guys meet then? How far does that go?
Yeah,
back?
was that when the relationship started, or?
Oh man.
no. So he had came by here a few times.
Yeah, like early, like 2016, 2017. I grew up like 2 miles, 3 miles north of here. So
Okay.
going down to like Woodward Dream Cruise, the Woodward Dream Cruise or the Pontiac Loop is like mile north. All the videos that you see of people doing rowdy burnouts during the Dream Cruise, it's like a mile, north,
Okay.
mile south of here. So
Yeah.
like
Okay.
anytime I go down to Woodward or cruise down Woodward, you drive by here, and if the door's open or there's people outside, you'll drive by and there's a bunch of race cars. And if it's too early in the day or too late at night, the door's shut and it looks like an abandoned building. It's like the Need for Speed shop. You
Yeah.
never know it's here.
Yeah, so he just kind of started stopping by, and
I sold you a blower off the CTSV, and then I
Yep.
bought a turbo for a 01 Cherokee. Yeah.
had some beater Cherokee he would take there's like a Holly off-road park, I don't know, 20 minutes north of here. And he would go jump this this Cherokee up there and was like, hey, you got a turbo for this thing? And I'm like, I mean, I got a whole bunch of garbage you can piece together, and he went home, welded this crap together and got rolling, and then
Put a
he had
big
this F-150 he bought with a blower on it and started stopping by, and eventually pulled the blower off, put a turbo kit on it, and again, it was just tuned on stock ECU by somebody else, and
did good. It was just 2-wheel drive, didn't hook up, and
Yeah.
wish I would have bought a 4-wheel drive truck and didn't. And I was like, shit, I can figure this out. So went on the eBay, bought a front diff. The guy wanted $200 for it, and then I offered him $175. He said no. It was like 2 months later, he lowered the price to like $159 or $160. So I snagged it, and I was like, joke's on you. Some CV axles for $25 for the driver's side and like $30 or $40 for the passenger side from the Junkyard. Welded some brackets in, and turbo 400, some Duramax transfer case, and just it was like it was meant to be swapped.
How difficult was it? How long did it take you to do all that?
It wasn't too bad. So the motor in the truck, when I did the swap, the motor was already blown, and I've had a hoist at home at the time. So I pulled the cab off, pulled the motor out. The frame, I mean, when you think of it from a manufacturing standpoint, they're not going to make a bunch of different frames and knuckles and
Right.
everything. So when I pulled the cab, basically I went to the Junkyard, looked at some 4-wheel drive trucks, went home, realized that the front sway bar has the hole for the front diff already there. And then the front knuckles are the same. They're just not machined for the IWEs, which are like the 4-wheel drive vacuum actuated hubs. So I got some 4-wheel drive wheel bearings off eBay, used, because new ones are expensive. And then threw those in the 2-wheel drive knuckles, threw some used CV axles and some front diff with 150,000 miles, I think, in it. Welded some brackets to the frame. It was super easy when everything was out of there. So I was able to use that one hole on the sway bar mount to kind of locate the one side, and then used a floor jack to raise the other side of the front diff up, and took some measurements, had his employee Adam laser or plasma cut me some mounts and just TIG welded them in, put it back together.
Yeah, didn't you say at dinner last night? I think it was like $1,000 all said and done. Or
Oh
something
yeah,
that?
like all said and done, like the CV axles, I ended up buying whole knuckles, like the knuckles with the wheel bearings in it off eBay, but then I realized that they were the same knuckle, and I just swapped the wheel bearing out because it was easier. I didn't have to do a realignment or anything, so I swapped the wheel bearings. I have those knuckles somewhere. I think the knuckles were like $200 for knuckles both sides with wheel bearings. CV axles, I blow boots on the CV axles all the time, and it's cheaper just to buy a used CV axle than it is to put a new boot on it. And they're anywhere from like $30 to $50 at Schramm's in Pontiac. So so whatever, another $100, so I'm 300 there, and then the front diff was whatever, 150, 160 bucks, and then the transfer case I use is $8.99 remanufactured on eBay. And when the chain stretches, you just buy another one.
That sounds about the same kind of price as like doing a Honda all-wheel drive swap.
Yeah, I was
Not
asking.
anymore.
CRV
Man,
parts.
until you buy real parts for it.
Yeah, well, most of the guys we've been talking to are grabbing CRV parts out the junkyard.
So like to do a legit all-wheel drive Honda B series, I'll say you're gonna have.
If you can't just slide it in, get it to fit right, or it bends a little bit funny, it's time to get some proper mandrel bends. Whether you are a weekend warrior or a shop owner, Hayes Performance has what you need to get your charge piping or exhaust dialed. From flex couplers to T-bolt clamps, if you want to lay down some pipe, go to HayesPerf.com and use Minnoxide 5 to get 5% off any Hayes Performance products. That's HAZEPERF.com. Let's get back to the show.
Almost 25K just in driveline.
Oh, really?
Between like a billet bell housing, you know, say a PPG 1 through 4 handcuff, nice drive shaft, Wagovan viscous coupler, having the viscous coupler redone, you know, limited slip for the front, limited slip for the rear, having the rear end redone, you know, not even getting into like mounting brackets or anything. The B stuff is actually more expensive, I would say, than doing a K. A K all-wheel drive and front-wheel drive basically share the same gear set, where the B series all-wheel drive stuff is basically in a league of its own. It's its own transmission, and they just crank the price up. Probably, I'm assuming, probably not as much want for it, you know. And you can't just sell it to front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive guys, so it's just more. So you can go buy a CRV and basically rob everything out of it. Buy one. You need 2 short axles for the rear, but you could basically build an all-wheel drive setup for the price of whatever you pay for a CRV. You know, it won't be super strong, but you will have an all-wheel drive Civic for $1,000. You know, so. But yeah.
How did that switch from Hondas to Evos happen, though? Like, I'm sure when you looked out there to see what was available, what made you choose Evo over something else?
So I didn't choose Evo. Evo chose me. So I had done. I had a couple customers that had Evos that, you know, I'd build a turbo kit for, or, you know, basically at that time I only had a 2-wheel drive dyno. So I had one of these, like, whatever. I keep looking at this one, but it's Blue by You. I had some kid with a Electron Pearl Blue or Electron Blue Evo come by, and he literally wanted to buy like some HID headlights or something, and I was like, dude, kid, don't waste your money on this. You know, like, don't go put some fake aftermarket HID headlights in this car. And I walk outside, I hear him crank this thing over. It basically doesn't want to start. They finally get it running, and I walk out there and I'm like, what ECU is this car on? And he looks at me and says AEM V2. And I said, I could make that thing run better. And that was literally it. So he tells me who was tuning it. I know the guy. I'll say he's well respected in the community, been real fast. And I'm like, I feel like this guy could tune a car. So maybe there's something wrong with this car. You know, I mean, sometimes you're going tuner shopping, but you just don't want to admit to yourself that you built a piece of crap, you know?
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'll do you this. I'll give you my phone number. You give me a call later tonight. You come over to my house. I'll plug into this thing. We'll go out and drive around. You give me a half hour. Either I'm going to get this car driving better immediately, or I will put the old tune-up back in it, charge you $0 and send you on your way. Because whatever, I do Honda and some other stuff. I'd never really messed with an Evo, like as far as tuning it. So we go out, we drive around, we make it from like my house up to the mall down the road, 1.5 miles. And he's like, oh my God, I can already tell how much better it is. And I'm like, I don't really think there's anything wrong with this car. It just seems like the tune-up's really bad. So I get it taking some hits down the road, and, I give him the option. I said either I could tell his dad was going to pay this bill, and it's like midnight now. So I say, I give you two options. Either I'll put the old tune-up back in it and send you home, or I'm going to lock this thing down at, say, 15, 20 pounds, kind of slow, knowing that you'll have to come back. I'm going to password protect this thing and send you home to protect my money. So he says, well, I don't want back in it what was in it before. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I'll lower the boost a little bit, password it, send him home. So he come back the next day. I end up tuning the car up. And then this kid, this is the auto swap car. So it's got a 6-bolt and a Evo 8. So him and his brother went and bought this car. Again, stock ECU, somebody else tuning it. And so at the time, this is still the AEM days. So I put AEM V2 box in the car, turn it up on like a 3794. I'll say a 67 mil 35R for those that don't know, some old FP turbo name, So we get it running pretty hard, high 50s, low 60 pounds of boost. We spray it with a 100 shot, and it's fast. On the street, it spools fast. It got it pretty good. We went out and beat a bunch of GTRs with it, and everybody else's 1,500 horsepower car with what probably made 800 wheel.
What time frame was this?
This is probably 8-9 years ago, 7-8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, just want to know what period. Period correct.
So, I would hurt this car all the time. I didn't quite understand yet that the difference between this thing and a B series, And I was torque spiking the shit out of these things and hurting head gaskets and just didn't quite grasp it yet. So there was a lot of trial and error with this thing, but we were out with it 5 nights a week street racing it. And this thing took a W every time we took it out. And even if this thing got hurt on Friday night, I would have it back at the street races on Saturday. I don't care if this thing needed pistons swapped in it, head redone, welded deck, valves, head gasket, whatever. I would fix this car overnight, no matter what was wrong with it. I even folded some aluminum rods up in it once on like a Friday night and had it back out of the street races on Saturday.
Jeez.
Like back on the Carrillo steel rod, just right in the car, pull the head, quick and dirty, hone the block, even though the rod had been hitting the cylinder wall, and just pack it back together. So the Evos just kind of started flooding in.
Okay.
So like
to you for like business wise, like people started coming in.
So it was like, all right, well, there's one. Mind you, I still don't own an Evo at this time period. So like, I had like 9 of these things in here at a time, and this is all we were doing was just, there'd be 7 silver Evos in Michigan. So we'd have 7 silver Evos, 1 white, 1 black, whatever. So one of my customers, this is probably 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, was taking apart a silver Evo, putting everything into some white Evo chassis he bought. So he put the silver car for sale, and I kept trying to basically lowball him. Sorry, James, if you watch this. So I wait until he lowers it real far, and I bought the chassis for a couple $1,000. And then I found another totaled car that still pretty much had everything with it for like another $1,700. So basically I was able to almost put together an Evo for $3,500 or something,
They don't give them away like that anymore.
No, you don't find these deals anymore. I've seen them cheaper actually, but just not often. Sometimes people don't know what they have. So I just
like the deal for you the other night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So like my plan was that I was just gonna build like a 500 or 600 horsepower street Evo, and as I put it together, I was talking to one of my machinists at the time, and he's like, "Hey, you want to half fill this thing?" And like my employee sits there looking at me, and I'm like, "Just full fill it." And he's like, "I thought you wanted a street car." I'm like, "Just full fill it." You know, I'm just going to give up before I even put this thing together. That we're just going to build a race car. And so I drove it for maybe about a year, even with the filled block in it. We'd do some street driving with it. Hadn't been to the DSM Shootout in probably 15 years or something. Went down to the Shootout with one of my buddies, Garrett, this kid Marco, and a couple of my buddies. You know, and we're coming back from it, and I think the car went, whatever, 940 or something like that, you know. Which, whatever, is a fun street car.
Right.
You know. So I get back from there, and, like, you know, we just drove, whatever, 3-4 hours back. We've had a long weekend. And we get back, and I'm like, I'm gutting this car right now. You know, I'm pulling the back seats out, I'm cutting up the doors. And over this following winter, because Shootout's kind of late in the year, so over that winter, my buddy Garrett at the time was doing like a 25.5 chassis in a Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
Okay.
So it was 4G swap 3000 GT. I think it's still the world's fastest 3000 GT, actually.
I can't imagine. Do a lot of people build those? Because they're few and far between.
They just suck to work on.
Really?
Really? I want one real bad. I've had several people talk me off that ledge.
yeah.
Here's another one.
You don't want one of these? So he was doing a chassis on it, and, you know, I'm like, you know, this car had been done, you know, whatever, I'll say whatever, half chassis, 3/4 chassis, whatever you want to call this car. You know, and I'm looking at both of them, and I'm like, you know what, I could do this too. You know, I could 3/4 chassis a unibody car. This should be easy. So, you know, and I'm always a small shop. Me and one guy, me and two guys, whatever. So, me and my guy Chris of the time, Subaru guy. Literally, the car was sitting here in the corner, never moved. We cut it apart right where it sat. I jacked it up. I strapped this thing to the roof, pulled most of the chassis out from it, welded it up, and now we've got a 3/4 chassis Evo. So just kind of fell into my lap, you know, we'll say. So now I wanted something different, you know, so I sold, I had a Fox body notch and this K-swap Porsche I was talking about, and I'll say I came up from first car, lowrider truck. So I've always kind of been into the lowrider truck stuff. S10 was my first car. Always wanted a Cyclone. Had a couple Typhoons, you know, 15 years ago or something. So eventually, as I was kind of selling stuff off, and me and him were at PRI this year, and I'm like, you know what? I'm doing a Cyclone now. Now's the time. I'm gonna end up too old where I'm not gonna be able to, you know, cut up a car, full chassis something anymore. Eventually my body's not gonna work anymore. So decided now is the time, and I've got a pretty, like I was mentioned yesterday, I've got a pretty nice built like aluminum rod LS motor, and nothing wrong with the LS, but we like to make some parts and stuff like that to try to help support our racing addiction, and there is like nothing left to make for an LS. China has already made every part there is for this motor. There's nothing left. So I'd like to do something different. Alex here's got a Coyote. Again, same deal. Never tuned a Coyote before, never messed with one before his truck. And, you know, whatever, I think this year, new motor, new injector, you know, so we'll say starting not from scratch, but, you know, a little bit of a base point, fourth hit, truck made 2385. So what am I doing messing with an LS motor? You know, the Coyote just makes more sense. You know, I mean, I come from an overhead cam, you know, I'm used to a little bit smaller bore, little shorter stroke, but, you know, it makes more sense than some push rods to me. You know, so
Somebody that gets it.
yeah, you know, exactly. You know, I mean,
We got that recorded for you, Dan. Don't worry.
I would hope we've advanced in the last 70 years, but you never know, right? You know,
You can put them together relatively cheap for the power level.
Yeah.
Right? Like factory heads, factory crank, factory cams. I mean, my motor's nothing special. Factory crank.
I mean,
It's an iron block, non-sleeved iron block. Some fancy prototype head gaskets that have been working pretty sweet. When Well, let's start from the beginning, right?
Yeah, tell us about that whole thing. Because how do you get to 2385? In a street truck.
So initially it started off as a Roush nightmare. So it was supposed to be a daily driver. I had a different vehicle that was like my toy, you could call it, and I was like, I'll just get like a little supercharged Coyote truck just to play around with. He'll be the daily driver. They were basically, it was before the F150s got huge. So I bought it in 19. Sorry, no, wow. It was a 19. It was leftover. I bought it in 20, like beginning of 20, and it was a 19. So they had like a $10,000 rebate. Everyone in Michigan gets employee discount because everyone knows someone that works for the big three.
Yeah.
So I got like I think I paid under sticker for like my nightmare F-150. So it was like a no-brainer. Either buy a base model truck or buy a truck with a blower. Buy a truck with a blower. Mm-hmm. Well, I found out that these Coyote motors were way sweeter than what I was working with to begin with as a race car. So I sold the race car at the time.
What was the race car at the time?
Race car.
Yeah.
It was I had a ton of them. It was a 09 335D BMW. So that was also supposed to be a daily driver, just a diesel BMW, but it had some custom ground cams, had studs, hybrids, big fuel pump, and I sprayed it with like 150, 200 shot of nitrous. We took it to some dyno day. It made 496 and like 700 or 800 foot-pounds of torque, and then we sprayed it and it made almost 1,100 foot-pounds. So like pulled up to this diesel truck dyno day at the local Lions Club or wherever it was, and all these people are talking smack, and I go put down like more power than 90% of the trucks there. But sold that thing, got a new daily, then started modding the truck, got a twin turbo kit for it. Then it was still 10-speed stock motor, twin turbo, twin 67s or something.
Okay.
Had Midnight build the trans in it, and it just was two-wheel drive, so it just blew the tires off everywhere. It kind of got out of control too much, and that's when I decided to basically four-wheel drive swap it. We took it to the track, it blew up the rear diff. It was September at the time, so it just sat for the rest of the winter and tore it apart and started that four-wheel drive swap. And part of the issue when I four-wheel drive swapped it is no one else really had done it before. And it's not like, there was a couple tuners that said that they could figure it out, but they haven't done it yet. So I didn't want to be the test dummy. So with the Mustang, when you 400 swap a Mustang, you can go into HP tuners and change it to a manual, change ECU to a manual because it's already there. In the F-150, it's not there, so they weren't sure how they were going to do it or if it was even possible. So I was like, screw it, I'll just put a standalone in it. The truck had a AMS 2000 for boost control. I was like, I can sell this AMS 2000, it'll pay for the ECU, and then I won't have two different, say, boxes or ways to control the truck, and everything will be together, right? And then four-wheel drive swap the truck, drop the center console off to Andy because the ECU sits in the center console of the truck, and then gave him some measurements. He did the whole wiring on it, and then it was standalone. I had a built motor for it, but it was middle of COVID, so the classic 6-week lead time for a motor turned into 8 months.
Yeah.
So it went stock motor. Well, sorry, when it was two-wheel drive, I blew up the stock motor, put a Junkyard motor in it. Holy crap, I'm trying to remember this.
So you had a stock motor.
Stock motor, blew it up, bought a built motor. My dad convinced me to buy a built motor for it. It took forever to come in, so I ended up buying a stock motor or a Junkyard motor in the meantime. Put the Junkyard motor in when it was two-wheel drive still. Was it still two-wheel drive?
It was still two-wheel because it was two-wheel, and then you never had the, I'll spare their name, built motor in the car when it was two-wheel. It was only when it was four-wheel. So he did the all-wheel drive swap, built motor, and standalone basically at the same time, if I'm thinking right.
Well, I think it had the first Shootout, first DSM Shootout, it was four-wheel.
Because you had to go back to the stock motor.
I had to go back, yeah. So that's the story.
Yeah,
built motor, yeah. So it went four-wheel drive, TH400, built motor, standalone. Like,
okay.
They did take care of this.
They took care of it, and it was middle of COVID, shit happens, you never know who works for them, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm no longer having anyone build my motors anymore. Mm-hmm. They're just going to be built by me. And then if something goes wrong, there's no one to blame but me. But basically put the built motor in.
Like 500 miles maybe?
Yeah, I went and took a test hit, and it self-destructed within like 500 miles, right?
So this thing, all right, so again, my first Coyote, right? We get this thing running. I'm kind of looking at the oil pressure, and I'm like, I just don't know anything about it, right? Yeah. That seems low, right? I'm used to Honda and Mitsubishi, and I do some stuff for the Mitsubishi to make them have them, real high oil pressure. So I'm like, man, this seems bad, but whatever, I don't know no better. So, and I'm like, this thing just doesn't sound right. So I think we literally driving around on 20, 25 pounds, something like that. He goes to take a hit with it, and I think I turned it up another, 5 PSI or something. And he calls me, and he's like, yeah, it, blew up. I'm like, what do you mean it blew up? There's no way, Yeah. I'm not just guessing. There's no way that, this thing just leaned out and burned up or something. So somebody ratchet strapped it back up here.
Mark ratchet strapped it back. I pulled the
Yeah, we were messing with it, and, he pulls one valve cover, and then we end up pulling the other valve cover.
There's a timing chain hanging here, cam cap's broken.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so basically it was supposed to be new everything. I don't believe the heads were new. Basically, on any overhead cam car, the cam caps are put on the head, and then they line hone it all together.
Them caps are married to that cylinder head.
Those cam caps will only
when I did
fit,
mine, I laid them all out so they all went back on right where they were supposed to go.
I can't take cam caps off his cylinder head and put it on mine. It's just, it doesn't work that way. Well, the cam caps on my motor were not from that motor. They fit, but
They've been hand sanded out.
Hand sanded with a Dremel.
Somebody had ovaled these things out to where the cam would actually spin.
We pulled the cam caps off, and there was some cams or some of the caps you could see where the cam was riding on the cap in one spot, and some it wasn't touching at all.
And you could still see where they had hand jobbed the cam cap to make it work. So we're like, holy crap, He calls this place. They agree to take care of it. He palleted it up, ships it out. He young enough, so he ambitious. He swaps another stock motor in it.
This is the week before the Dream Cruise.
Yeah, this is right before the Dream Cruise.
Woodward Dream Cruise Wednesday.
Yeah, it was
And you're still running on an F-150 firing order, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're not horribly expensive. Would that cost you $2,500? Maybe.
Well, he still had the stock motor.
I still had the stock motor.
So he had the second stock motor still sitting there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he just swapped the stock motor back in with, and whatever, oil pump gear, head stud. I don't even know if it had head studs.
It didn't have studs. I locked the cams out. I swapped the lockouts from the built motor back to the Junkyard motor. Because the Junkyard motor before was on the stock ECU, so I locked the cams out. Tuesday night I blew it up, and then I drove it back up here Wednesday. I pulled an all-nighter, threw the motor in.
Shit.
Can't miss Woodward Dream Cruise.
No.
No, I've done a few of those. Blow it up. Andy likes to do this thing where he sees me chugging smoke down the road, blown up, and turns the other way.
Yeah, so he takes a lot of test hits fairly close back behind us here. And
the stock motor.
I go to a couple different gas stations at night on my way home. I only live a half mile from here. So I was driving down the next main road up here to go get something at night at 2 a.m. And I know you just went to take a test hit, and I see him pull up, and this thing is just chooching out driver pipe, and I'm like, keep going, he'll call if it's that bad,
Yeah,
and he calls me a couple minutes later, and he's like, dude, did you see that? And I'm like, yeah, it looks like you blew that thing up, And he's like, I think it like broke a piston or something. And I'm like, yeah, it probably did. You know, because this was like
Stock motor.
I don't know, 28,
pounds.
30 pounds. I think we might have got one of the stockers up to like 32 pounds, something like that. And I mean, it's not like we're regapping the rings or anything, you know, just trying to flood it rich to, you know, keep it from butting the rings and breaking the piston. And it butted the rings and broke the piston. So
Well, a 19, that's a Gen 3.
Yeah,
What's
Gen
the
3.
compression on one of those? Isn't
12
it
to
through the
1.
fucking
cares?
Holy fuck. 12 to 1.
So he
Yeah, this
calls
was
and I was like,
Who cares?
yeah, it doesn't matter. This is on E, you know? So he calls and he's like, you know, we kind of chat about it at like whatever, 1, 2 in the morning that night. And this is probably like, again, like
A Wednesday.
This was
there was
Wednesday
a race
night.
Saturday.
So there's a race. Was it Friday or Saturday there was a
It
race?
was Saturday. It was
So,
at
well,
Lapeer.
then you might have blown it up Thursday. You blew it up Thursday. So then he calls, we talk about it again Friday, and I'm like, bro, you could just like skip half a day of work. You could just stay up all night and throw a piston in it. Just hot swap this thing, you know? So he pulls the 1-cylinder head off, smacks a piston in it, and heads out to Lapeer Dragway, you know, about 45 minutes north of us. And I'm waiting, you know, I come to work in the morning, so I'm like, somebody will keep me updated. You know, I call him, you going to the track still? He's, yeah, I'm on my way. All right, this is going to be sweet, you know. This thing's going to go fast. Like, I know it is. Everybody already messaged me, bro, what happened to Alex's truck?
All right, Dan, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think your wife loves you?
Ooh, it's got to be like an 8, solid 8.
So I think it would be great if she used your credit card to go to tunedbyshawn.com to get you a Haltech ECU for 5% off using code Minnoxide. Does that math out?
Absolutely.
I don't think we tell her about this ad until it runs, though.
And I'm like, you tell me, man. I haven't seen nothing yet. It's been like, you know, it's probably been 2 minutes this thing tried to make a hit.
Yeah.
Makes it out about 40 feet.
That's when I found out you got to hone them ATI balancers.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
And this
Well, and you got to remember, like, I went from a 335 diesel BMW where you just tune the thing, you know,
Right.
and throw more air at it to like race car. So like I'm learning as time's going on. Like
Sounds
I
like you
didn't have
learned like I
anything-
do. I've blown a few
I didn't
motors
have-
too.
Yeah, you
I
have
didn't have
to. It's
anything
like, he's had a good life with learning so far. It hasn't even been that expensive, to be honest. You know, like, so yeah, he left the line. You can see, and this is when I was like, dude, you gotta put a rear end in this thing. I mean, you can see it, like the rear wheels, like
toe in.
like
shit.
toe out or something. Like you see
whole
the
axles.
whole wheels do this as it just like bends the tubes, you know. And it kind of like stutters off the line a little bit, makes it out 30 feet, 40 feet, and just sends the front like 4 or 6 inches of the crankshaft with the damper off.
Oh, I'm sitting there and you hear the balancer bouncing off the frame rails. And it wasn't until I hit the brakes, it like dipped the front enough or something happened to where the balancer had enough space to get out. And I'm sitting there, I hear something banging around. I don't know what it is. At the Lapeer track, the walls are like super close. The balancer in the video, you can see the balancer hit the ground, bounce between the front frame rails of the truck. It hits the wall of the track, bounces up and over like the hood of the truck, hits the ground, looks like a Beyblade, does like these crazy spins. I mean, we were spinning this stock motor to like 9,000 almost, like 8,800 or something, just pushing it past what we should be doing. And this balancer makes like a full quarter-mile pass without me. Like the whole track without me. Got a slip for it and everything.
Did you really?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess
like,
part of the
didn't go,
truck
it like
made it.
wasn't that bad. I'm pretty sure like it went like 6 something to the 8th.
Yeah,
The balancer.
so that was finally the end, at least for him, that was the end of stock motors.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think when that one let go, I think again it was late in the season.
Yeah, it was like September, October, like one of the last events of the year.
Yeah, so like he just went to, it was like, I won't say an open track day, but not like a race. You know, it was an event.
Right.
You know,
And that's when it got back halved. was that
Yep.
summer.
I was gonna ask when you decided and why you decided to back half it.
Because the rear axle flexed so bad.
The rear axle, well, it was supposed to just get a cage. I have a buddy that works at one of the airbag companies here, and he was showing me some crash test videos of these aluminum trucks, and it's like really bad.
Really?
Like really bad. There's this bar on the frame rail that sticks out like a foot that's behind the front tires, and it's everyone with F150s pops that out or cuts it out to try and save weight. Well, that bar is to where if you get in a 25% or over front end collision, it takes the front tire and pushes it away from the body. Without that there, that front tire basically rips the whole side of the truck off. He was showing me these crash test videos or pictures where that bar wasn't there and like the front tire was like in your torso.
Oh shit.
Oh, like bad. So I had those cut off on my truck, of course. So I dropped it off to get a cage over at ECU Race Cars in Davison, and I had him basically quote me out for the back half, and it wasn't that bad. So I just had him do the whole thing. So they chopped the factory frame rails at like there's 6 bed bolts. So it starts after the first bed bolt and then stops before the last one. So the bed still uses for the factory bolts. But the cage is tucked below the bed rails. So it's like sleeper. I don't know if it'll certify, but more so just so I don't die.
It'll 850 certify.
Okay. So, but now you can add proper drag link and all that shit.
Yeah,
to
so
get
now
the
it's
rear end in there.
4-link, 9-inch
Yeah.
rear end, Vikings in the front, AFCOs in the back. All the fancy stuff. When you look at it, you can't tell there's chassis work done to it unless you get close. If there was a tonneau cover on, you'd never know.
So you have the bed to go on? Oh yeah, you had the bed on.
Yeah, I think we saw that, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Over there
yeah.
at Matt's? Yeah.
Yeah, the bed's at Matt's. It just wasn't on there because we had this.
I don't know. Every time I've seen it's been in like a different state of something.
Yeah, I mean, we just have fun with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
my buddy bought a sand car and we went up to Silver Lake. Silver Lake Sand Dunes is like 2.5-3 hours from here. My buddy bought a sand car and we went up there a few times, and driving up there, we just made a joke of like, we're going to put some sand paddles on my truck and bring it to the sand dunes. And I think it was Memorial Day weekend. My buddy Matt Gottschalk let me borrow his paddles he has a set of super scoops, like 36-inch big tires or 33-inch big tire that they glue and bolt paddles to. And I bought some adapters and bolted them up to the truck, took the bed off, and brought up to the sand dunes. The motor was already hurt. I mean, before the new motor that's in it now, that motor has had like 3 sets of head gaskets, different head studs. Can't keep a head on it with the old motor setup.
Yeah.
So I was like, screw it, it's already hurt. Might as well take it up to the sand dunes and have some fun. And it did like really well. It was a ton of fun, but sand everywhere.
Yeah.
Dude, I think the lakes are freezing over right now.
Yeah, that's what I want to do next.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody watching this owns a set of studded tires they want to loan Alex, so we can go do some cool stuff out on the ice. Maybe.
Yeah, I want to start a set of radials and go out lake drag it. I think it'd be a blast.
I just picked up a set of tires. I mean, I don't have the studs in them, but you can add the studs.
Well, I think I'm gonna do
off
it
Amazon for my Lincoln.
I got
It's
a
a lot
perfect
of work.
idea for these
Is
guys.
it?
Dude, you know who else just pitched an idea like this to us like 3 weeks ago at PRI or whatever?
Scully.
Scully.
Yeah.
So our buddies that do nitrocross, or
Yeah.
formerly known as nitrocross, they're trying to take their rally cars and go do some crazy ice racing. It'd be cool to
Yeah.
get those two guys together, and then your fucking F-150.
They do some. Where is it? Wisconsin. They do it.
Yeah.
They do ice drags on the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
So
sweet.
my daughter's gonna start drag racing snowmobiles on the ice. She's
Yeah.
got an event coming up at the end of this month, and then another one end of February. So yeah, we do that quite often up there.
You ever seen the snowmobiles with the ice skates on the front?
Like the
Uh,
full blown
ice
like
skates.
1,000-horse snowmobiles.
Like 1,500 horse, and so the
Speed
it's
needle
like
or something.
I think the world's fastest is called Speed Needle. It's a
Gixxer?
bunch of it's done by Hypersport, if that
Okay.
makes any sense. Craig over at Hypersport makes like a billet block that mounts a Hayabusa cylinder head. And I know that I think from what I hear, they don't like the name Hayabusa
Yeah.
with it because it's. I think you might be able to get like a full billet cylinder head from them now too. So they'll be like, 75, 80 pounds of boost, methanol, 4-cylinder sled, and they
Have a 16-inch ice skate.
And they did a ton. They were talking to us at PRI last year. They did a ton of research and testing on different designs of ice skates. And at first, we've all seen enough snowmobiles before.
Yeah.
You see this thing sitting there, and it's wild looking. It's got the whole fiberglass Outlaw front end on it, and I'm like, man, this thing just kind of looks odd. You know what I mean? It was probably until Friday or Saturday at PRI when I'm finally looking at it, and I'm like, this thing has ice skates on it in the front instead of the I don't know what you call it, the
with
ski,
a carbide,
the carbide skis. And I'm like, holy crap, this thing's got ice skates on it. And we started talking to them, and I think it might be the Bain brothers, I think is what it was, or Bain Racing, something like that, owns the Speed Needle.
Okay.
And there's only 1 or 2 lakes that they take it to, and they Zamboni this thing. So I'm assuming there's no suspension on this thing. It's, the front nose has got to be a 1/4 inch off the ground or something. So they actually run a Zamboni over the lake and super smooth it out before they run this thing.
Oh, really?
So yeah, and it's 200 mile an hour, and
I know that.
No,
I
not
think
even. It's-
some of the records are set. So we do speed runs where we're at, and it's 200 and some miles an hour. I want to say
Yeah.
it's even
Yeah,
could
no
be in the
thanks.
220, 230, something like that.
you familiar with the Grinch?
I think so.
It's a green,
Yep.
supercharged on
Yep.
M5. Yeah, so I think it's kind of the same group of people involved with both of those. This one's a turbo sled,
Okay.
and that the Grinch is a blower now. It might have been turbo in previous life forms, but last I saw it at least was a, big blower on it. So
Okay.
yeah, no, they get ridiculous.
Yeah.
So-
We usually do the. I don't watch too much of the guys that are going that fast because it's that's not even. That's like going to Texas 2K and being like, "This is really cool."
I'm gonna go
but this
watch
isn't
all the
where-
twin turbo Lambos that
Yeah,
I can't
exactly.
afford.
But yeah, as far as I know, I think some of the speed run records are set on the lake where I got a cabin at. So
And that you're in.
I'll have to Shitek, Wisconsin.
Okay, and I want to say that I'll look it up
All right.
after this, and like I say, I think there's only 1 or 2 lakes that they'll even go to that they can get smooth enough for it.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's got to be.
It might
somewhere.
be. I know I've seen this Grinch one before, whether it was online or at the drags. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
if
that's
all,
fun.
If all the big dogs are showing up, then
yep.
yeah, it's got to be. There's a couple places within a couple hours of here that get pretty serious. And I'll say the Link ECU is very big in the snowmobile community.
Okay.
So over the winter, I would say we sell at least 7 to 10 ECUs to people that, they say, oh, it's nothing you're used to. I'm putting it on a snowmobile. I'm always like, what kind of snowmobile? Oh, it's a drag sled, and it's a lot of the, I think it's like a ZX 1200 or 12 Z1. It's like a 1200 cc 2-cylinder
Okay.
Arctic Cat motor or something like that.
A lot of I'm not sure what Arctic Cat does for 4-strokes, but I ride Yamahas, which are basically like Yamaha R1 engines.
The
shit like
Apex
that.
motor, probably. Or
The
something.
Apex, my wife rides an Apex with the R1
Okay.
in it.
Yep.
Mine has I ride a Sidewinder, so it's the 998, which is still a 2-cylinder, just
Okay.
under 1,000 cc, but it's got a turbo on it.
Yeah, I tuned a side by side with a Apex motor swap in it.
Okay.
It was actually like one of those weird Arctic Cat, whatever. something.
Arctic Cat and Yamaha have been in bed together for a little while anyway.
So this-
Yamaha makes the engines for a lot of Arctic
This
Cat
was
stuff.
a swap though.
Oh,
like
was
the
it?
Apex
Okay.
motor was an actual sled motor swapped into
Like an 18 or
like a Wildcat or whatever they're
Oh,
called,
okay.
side by side.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And,
Uncle Scott's or different?
No, it was I can't remember what his name was. Lives right up by Silver Lake Sand Dunes, and I know if you hurt something up there and you need a machinist, they always send you to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he made his own billet trans case and everything for it. Was using like, gears out of some Chrysler front wheel drive trans in it, and I mean, he is smart. Mathed this all out, and we've done a couple other side by sides with that Z1, which is the Arctic Cat. Whatever, 1200 2-cylinder motor. There's a local dude that's got one that makes like 650 horse that street drives it. And then we did some tuning on one of the world's fastest side-by-sides that was, again, the Z1 motor. They used to race in Outlaw probably 3-4 years ago, something like that. And
That's becoming the whole side-by-side thing, and now they're getting drag strips and stuff set up for that.
We were down
huge now.
at FL2K after the Cleetus race, and the guys that were pitted next to us went like 850 or something.
Really?
In some side, I mean, had a ton of work done to it, but like
Right.
stock cage, some Can-Am with a bunch of motor work that looked stock, and he went like 8 something. I was like, holy shit.
Jesus.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy. They said he's street racing and all this other stuff.
that crowd seems to pour some money into those
Oh,
things.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, talk to us a little bit about this Cleetus race that you did, because you keep bringing it up. I haven't ever really talked to you about
It's
it.
a sore subject. So,
Oh yeah.
so basically, last year was the first year with the built motor. This year was the second year with the built motor.
Go use the restroom.
You're good.
Basically, the old motor setup was sleeve Gen 3 block, ported Frankenstein Gen 3 heads, some I don't know brand 1/2-inch head studs that were in it, and copperhead gaskets, top fuel hoops, brought to the sand dunes. Had fun with it. When I was at the sand dunes, I killed the trans, so got it back, got the trans fixed, still had the hurt motor, threw another set of, I think I went through like 2 or 3 sets of head gaskets this past summer season, you could call it. And then the Cleetus race was happening, and I didn't get invited to it until like a week before. And I had my like block machined already. I had rods, I had pistons. I didn't have head studs. I didn't have heads. Like, it was like half the parts were there, but I was like, it's going to be a winter project. Season's over. When was the Cleetus race? Like late September, I think.
Okay.
The all-wheel drive Cleetus race, something like that. But basically, he messaged me on Facebook and said the spot's mine if I want it. So I was like, hell yeah, why not? I sent my nephew down to On 3. The guys at On 3 had a couple GT 350 motors, and I bought a whole long block for the heads. Got some valve springs from a place called PSI. They're out of Michigan. They have some like super high pound Coyote springs. So most people run 1281Xs in like the Gen 3 stuff. And I'm trying to spin this thing to 9,500, 10,000 RPM and like 55 pounds of boost. So I got these crazy, Andy called PSI for me and got these crazy valve springs made. Sent my nephew down to pick up a long block for the cylinder heads because I couldn't find GT350 heads anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm throwing this motor together like 5 days before the race. Like this is Monday. I send my nephew down and we have to be in Florida the following Wednesday to race. So Tuesday, I think it's Wednesday, I finally start assembling the long block. The short block's all put together. So basically it's a Ford Performance iron block, stock crank, MGP aluminum rod, stock GT350 heads, some PSI valve springs, some custom head gaskets we made for it. Fun fact, the Voodoo or the iron block is not the same as a Gen 3 or Gen 2. It uses a different head stud. So I put this long block together on Wednesday and I find out that they don't make a 625 head stud for this block. So I had to call up ARP. Well, we're not gonna say that. I got some custom 625 head studs made for this thing. Throw this motor together, throw it in the truck Friday. We go to our buddy's shop that has a hub pack, Neighbor Racing, over there in like the Wixom area, and we put on the hub dyno first on wastegate. I think it made what, 9 low, mid to high 9s, and then basically every pull you added what, 10 pounds to it.
I think I stuck 10 in it, and it made like 1,300 something.
On top of wastegate.
Yeah, so I stuck 10 on top of gate. I think it made 13 something. Stuck 10 on top, made 18 something. Stuck 10 on top, made 23 something, and it was kind of small motor, comes up real fast, so it was getting hard to try to stop it without really bogging it. I would almost prefer that it kind of zinged right past it. It'll kind of keep the motor alive a lot longer than trying to bog it out and get it to build the big boost way down low.
Yeah.
So I think I tried to whack it with like 50 or 55 pounds, because I think it just over 40, it made 23 something.
It was like 42 or 43 pounds in the log.
Yeah, and I tried to stack another 10 or 15 at it, and it kind of just like blew right through it, didn't pick up anything. It didn't even pick up the boost because it basically just wasn't enough load. And I'm like, almost like if you're messing with a water brake dyno. Anytime you're dealing with a small motor and it's going to pick up all of its power over the course of like 500 RPM, it gets hard to grab it fast enough, you know? So it just was kind of blowing right through it, and kind of looked at Alex and I'm like, we don't need to hurt this thing here.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we're close enough, you know, to be able to comfortably turn the boost up to whatever we're going to need to, you know, to no prep race it. So let's get it off of here and go try to make a couple hits with it, you know. And I don't know where you left off at, but it was getting pretty late, and we pulled back up here, and I was trying to razz him, and we're with a buddy of ours, Nick, and them two were driving down to Florida together, that you should really unload this thing now and go try and take some test hits here. Oh, we just want to hit the road, you know. And I'm like, you should really unload this thing while I'm still here, take a couple hits with it, you know, whatever, 6 one, half a dozen the other. They hit the road, and then, you know, eventually I remoted in. What has it been? If the race was Tuesday morning, I remoted in.
It was Wednesday, so we left Saturday night.
No, that was Sunday.
No, that was Sunday.
So they left Sunday night, and then maybe like Tuesday night at like 2:30 in the morning, I remote into this thing. Maybe at first, probably 4 hours earlier, they tried to take a hit, sent me a log, super lean, no fuel pressure. He had just put 3 brushless pumps in it. Luckily, he took the old pumps with him. Swapped back to just the 4 or 525s in it, and took a hit, no timing in it, super slow ramp. It was a slug. I put too much in it just to take a guess at it so I could try and find a happy median. Second or third hit, Nick messages me back, oh yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, that thing was still soft for like the first 1 second, you know.
We're testing in the back of the Freedom Factory on like gravel. Right? like we can make like a 60 foot, and that's about all the space we have is like enough to do a 60 foot.
Yeah, so I tried to get after it a little bit more, and I kind of don't, you know, and I was hearing back in like 30 seconds, and all of a sudden, boom, communication stops for like 10 minutes. And he calls and he's like, oh, it's like won't move. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, it's like stuck where it's at. Like we're gonna have to drive the trailer to the truck. It won't move.
Yeah, we ended up, we took a test hit in a different spot. So we were behind the Freedom Factory, and then we moved and we were testing between the like circle track and Bradenton. There's a straight road there, so we tried to take a hit there, and something in the trans, I didn't know at the time. I thought maybe it killed a transfer case, and I just go get a transfer case, throw a transfer case in it. It ended up welding not the direct drum.
Planetaries or something.
Yeah, it ended up welding like the planetaries to something. I'm not a trans guy. It ended up welding parts together, and the trans was
Unintentionally.
Literally,
Yeah.
you watch the video, you hear like clunk clunk, and then all 4 tires lock up, and it's like boom. So we ended up basically bringing the trailer over from where it was parked and backed the trailer up to the truck, and then jacked it up. And we tried to fix it that night before the race because the race didn't start till 10. So Franco and I pulled an all-nighter. 5 o'clock in the morning comes around, and like employees from the Freedom Factory are like rolling into work, driving past us, and like we're like laying under this truck trying to drop the trans at like 4 or 5 in the morning. The one guy at the Freedom Factory, Josh, I'm pretty sure is his name, he rolled by us, and like we're like half awake under this truck trying to get it done. And there were some tools we needed, and he like went and grabbed us tools and brought specialty tools we didn't have, and got the trans out, and realized that like there was no way we were making the race in time. It wasn't something simple, but we ended up squatting at the Freedom Factory because it was the week before FL2K. So people started rolling to FL2K like Wednesday night, Thursday. So we ended up staying there. While the all-wheel drive race was going, we found a local guy, Cooper Bugatti, gave us this guy's number. We brought the trans by. He stopped everything he was doing and rebuilt the trans for me. I dropped it off at like 11 and got it back at like 4 or 5 same day.
Holy shit.
Put it back in, got a truck running again Thursday. We were trying to see if we could find some like street action or even like get into test and tune at FL2K, since we already drove 19 hours from Michigan to Florida. And we ended up staying till like Saturday night or Sunday.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, because we found a cash days, and we went to a cash days like 30 minutes away from Bradenton or something, ended up getting rained out. And then one guy decided to race us for $100 in Orlando, and then we went home.
How is the street action out there? I haven't been to FL2K yet.
Couldn't tell you, to be honest.
Yeah,
Thursday, Friday, we were trying to dial the truck in, so we were making hits like outside of the track at the other track. So like Thursday, Friday, we didn't really go out and see
it. Rained
it.
A bunch on you guys,
Yeah,
though, too.
it
like,
rained.
Yeah, I heard FL2K was a little bit of a bust this year because
Yeah,
of the rain.
it rained a ton, like a lot.
when I think some of the FL2K days, you know, I'm still like calling down, checking on them. Hey, you know, you guys gonna go take some test hits later? Make sure I got the Wi-Fi on my laptop with me. And yeah, you know, I'd talking to Nick or him, and yeah, we're gonna go take a hit in like an hour. You know, okay.
When it dries up, it's
I go
raining.
get some food. You know, come back to the shop, call them, and they're like, dude, it's just pouring rain down here again.
Basically everything that could go wrong.
It was in between those two hurricanes down there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, like, when he was leaving to go down there, I kept kind of watching it, and it was like, dude, you might be, like, driving down to a hurricane. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's not looking too good.
Literally,
know?
there was a hurricane the week before we got down there, and then I think the day after we left, we got back like Sunday. I think Monday, Tuesday, another hurricane hit.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Didn't they
it was-
just clean up the Freedom Factory too? Wasn't it like all like?
Well, he
messed
was, like,
up?
running the jet boat down the 8th mile.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that trip, it was fun. We met a bunch of cool people. Had a good time. Got to watch some of FL2K.
Yeah.
But everything that could go wrong went wrong. I lost a trans temp sensor. A trans temp sensor failed. A pressure sensor for my wastegate failed. Like, the universe just wasn't happy with me. But we weren't prepared. I mean, it was a completely fresh setup, different compression, different injectors, different everything. Never made that power before. The trans at that point Well, I guess it was just freshly redone, but like it was never built to hold 2,400 horsepower. We were just kind of seeing if it would do it.
Yeah.
See if it would do it.
There's some things that you don't rebuild until it breaks, right? I mean, you're just gonna go, well, we'll see how long this lasts.
The truck's been real.
Even originally, right? You know, like again, like he said before, he never had a race car before.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to build this TH400. He went with a guy, Rich Bewick or Detroit Gearbox. I'll say he's kind of famous in the
monster truck.
Does a lot of monster truck transmissions, you know. So like he understands like, you know, a big boy reed case, you know, high dollar transmission. So
yeah, I think when
he went to Rich and, you know, talking to him and Rich, and it was like, you know, I don't know, just tell him, you know, at the time, like, dude, maybe
16.
one day this thing will make 1,600 horsepower. You know, and it's like even thinking to yourself, like, man, that's not thing's a little 302, like,
right, yeah,
1,600 horse. That's like way down the road, you know. Well, then
that translates a long time.
You know, the stock motor puts up with
11.
You know, sometimes between 1,000 and 1,200 horsepower for 100 hits on this thing.
Yeah,
and then he puts built motor in it, and it makes X, right? Who knows, right? Like
never had
throughout this
on
whole
the
time, like with the standalone, I drove over to his house. We installed the wiring harness, and we fired it up for the first time. And it wasn't late; it was actually early in
middle
like
of the day.
Like middle of the day. I drive over there. Boom! We get this thing running. I'm like, whatever. All right, it's not like catching on fire. Let's back it outside, you know. And I'm like, all right, well. I do not like riding in customer vehicles. This is like, does not happen with Andy, you know? So like we cruise around the neighborhood with this thing for a little while, probably put 2 miles on it maybe, you know? And I'm like, whatever, it drives, you know? You can get it to my shop. He's like,
I live 3 miles away.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm like, whatever, just meet me up at the shop in a minute, you know, and we'll continue. So he gets up here and I'm like, how's it drive? He's like, sweet. And I'm like, yeah, we don't need to put this thing on the dyno. We'll just drive it around out here.
Just do some street tuning.
You know, we get it up to, 10, 15 pounds, like, immediately. And I'm like, well, whatever, you're probably happy for the moment, you know. So eventually, it goes 20 pounds of boost. Then it goes 30 pounds of boost. Then it goes 40 pounds of boost. And we've never dynoed this, so everybody's like, well, how much does that truck really make? And I'm like, I don't know.
We don't know.
We just do Wallace Racing Calculator, horsepower versus weight, or mile per hour versus weight. And, it would spit out, depending on the 8th mile hit, like, 1,800, So, all right, well, the truck makes like 1,800 horse. So then we do a new motor for it. And throughout this time, it had swapped from like some VS Racing turbos to some HPTs.
Yeah, it went from 67s to 78.
It had some 67 like on 3s on it or something.
67, 66 VS, and then it went 75 or 76.
78 75s.
Yeah.
And then now it's got 7880 HPTs on it. And he put the 7880s. Yeah, 7880 HPTs on it. And, we'll say on like lower boost, like anything, I don't know, below 20 or 25 pounds, it basically didn't seem like it was any different than the VS turbos. As far as fueling, airflow all looked the same. I'm like, it's kind of disappointing,
Mm-hmm.
We'll
spend a bunch of money on some turbos, It's kind of thinking magic was going to happen, this thing was going to pick up all sorts of power. So once we started to not even lean on it, just turn the boost back up to where it was, okay, it's starting to come around at 35 pounds. It's going a couple mile an hour faster than it was at like 42 pounds. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's a big difference, 40 pounds, it's going a lot faster than it used to. Okay, so I see where the money went, It's working now, And oh man, I'm gonna get lost here now. Where I was going with this
dyno that we never had on the dyno until the day before the Cleetus race.
Yeah, so then the day before the Cleetus race, when we put the new motor in it, it was just getting too late.
And it was kind of cold.
We fired it at like 1 o'clock in the morning, we'll say Saturday night, for like a minute. Matt and Ed and a couple other dudes were here, and we got it running. We still had to wire in the new brushless pumps and finish wrapping everything up. So by the time it was like all wrapped up, it's like 7:30, 8 o'clock. Well, there's like a house like 40 feet off the back of my building, and this thing's open up pipes, Coyote at 9,500 RPM.
Yeah.
So I'm like, in like a couple hours at most, or an hour and a half, we're gonna be out on the street with this thing, or I'm gonna have the cops here anyway, and I know that just from doing this previously, again, this thing makes power like this, it doesn't stretch this out, it makes nothing and then it makes everything. And that's hard to hold down on the dyno. So I'm like, we'll just try and take one hit on wastegate and see what it looks like, and he had switched from like, we'll say a Bosch 210 to some 2600s. So we get fueling semi-situated, we take a little whack at it. Of course, it just like nukes the tire on the dyno. I'm like, all right, we're wasting our time. This is when I was like, I told him to call his buddy Chris, that's good friends with Safe Neighbor, see if we can get his hub dyno now, and I'll say, Safe's another, like, I don't want to say small guy, but he's not, it's not like calling Moran, right?
Yeah.
Moran's not going to go open up a shop for us at midnight on Sunday to rent the hub dyno, so got a hold of him, got over there, and we'll say, as luck has it, it's just working,
And I'm sitting there in the corner like shitting my pants. Remember, I've never built a motor before.
Yeah.
Like, I built like small motors, like,
and I don't think
5-horse Briggs and Strattons, and I've like put head gaskets in my Yoti before, but I've never built a motor from scratch ever. And now we're about to whack this thing with 50 pounds. Just shitting my pants.
As they're strapping the car down and they're asking us like, what do you think it's gonna make, or how long is this gonna take? And I'm like, it shouldn't take no time, 4 or 5 pulls. If it looks good,
it's like, what are you gonna do? Like add 2-3 pounds?
And I'm like, well, if it looks good, I'll stick 10 in it. After the first hit, I'll stick 10 in it. If it looks good, I'll probably just stick 20 in it, and then maybe I'll go 10, and then maybe another 20, and we should be at 60 pounds. And I think they kind of were like, what are you thinking? Like, you're not going to just put 20. No, at one point, I think I did try and add 20 pounds, and it only picked up 18 or something like that, And I'm like, I did try and stick 20. I put 20 pounds on top of the dome, and it picked up 18 pounds. So it's making these big jumps, like most time you see a car get strapped down, it picks up 50 horse, maybe.
I'm going to go ahead there,
Professor. Maybe you get some Hero and it picks up 150, but this thing picked up 500 or better every hit, And I just said, well, as long as it's kind of on the rich side, I'm not even going to stop and fix it. I'm going to quick calculate it, make a change, and turn it up anyway, so that we don't get stuck here until 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, like, Safe's got a family. I know he doesn't really want to be there. He's just helping out some homies, so, I'm like, well, we'll try and be as quick about this as possible.
There was Safe's injectors in the truck because I only had 2200 or 210s and couldn't get injectors in time.
Yeah.
So I ended up borrowing them out of his. He has 2 sets of 2600s for his 2J. So we threw those in. He let me borrow them. So he wasn't racing. So like it was
like a big group effort to get this thing together in 4 or 5 days, like multiple shops involved, you know, and
it was
multiple friends, family, everybody just kind of helped get it together. And then, we'll say
you can see me in the background of the Cleetus video. You can see the truck on jack stands. Yeah. You can when he's first driving around.
The biggest thing is always making it there, right? Like I'm I'm sorry, I don't know if you own if you've got a race car or what. I know
No, it's all Dan's stuff. I'm passenger
Okay.
princess for the time
all
being.
right, all right.
So
So like,
cameras.
as you run a business or a shop, and you're always concentrating on a customer car or whatever, just making it to the event is a big thing, right? Just the fact that you left the shop and you're there. Whether or not this car is even going to work is another story, right? You made it. This thing runs, it drives on and off the trailer, and you made it down to Florida, right? Like, that's sweet. It'd be the icing on the cake that this thing actually works, goes rounds, makes passes, maybe wins some money, right? This is all like the Hail Mary, but for me, I'm always putting everybody ahead of my own car, own self, because to me, that's what the business owner should do.
That's
right?
typically the best shops that we've had on here, by the way, right? They never put their own builds first.
Yeah.
They're usually the best.
The reason, so there was a local turbo rebuilder. He's still around. And, he's talking to me about having some machine work done. He was gluten for punishment. He was into Nissan 300Z, twin turbo, right?
Okay.
The worst car to work on. And his son was real into it. They had a few of these things. They're pretty fast. They're trying to get some machine work done. They dropped the motor off to some place, and they're kind of getting BS'd around, and oh, it'll be done by Friday. Well, they go up there on Friday to try to pick this thing up, and of course, there's nothing done. They haven't finished boring it, honing it, cleaning it, nothing. And he's kind of like, what in the heck is going on? And they're like, oh, we don't have time for this right now. We're going racing this weekend and blah, blah, blah. We don't have time for your stuff. And he just, ate these people alive about, he doesn't give a damn about their racing program. And, you've made commitments to your customer. And basically, you're putting your shop race car over all of your customers, right? Which, hey, I can see both sides of this, right? Because the last minute, I might have to do this to make a race, right? Friday at the 25th hour, I can no longer help you. We're leaving. We're going,
Right.
or else we're not going, and I'm going to help you again, But for days ahead of time to be putting off the customer just so that you can, most likely haphazardly barely make it to a race that you're not going to be competitive in because you have not put the time in, is shitty, because maybe you could have raced, he could have raced, and he could have raced, and instead, just I made it.
Right.
Only I made it because I just didn't make the time for you guys. I had to finish my own car that, as a shop owner, is probably not ready, you know. Sometimes they are, but it's probably at the next race,
Well, we know that shop cars, they draw a lot of attention to the shop, right? So sometimes they're a necessity. Like you go out there.
No, and they are.
But
you
should be budgeting it into your shop time, right? Like you're still paying your employees to work on stuff like that. It should have a slot in the mix. And it shouldn't be, it shouldn't trump anybody else. It should be trot.
No,
probably.
I get it. So I feel bad, right? So my Evo or the Cyclone or whatever car is mine, if I post a dyno video of it or, hey, we just finished this, that, and the other on it, and I'm all proud of it. So I make this Facebook post, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, you got 3 comments in a row. Well, what about my car? Blah, blah, blah. And it's 3 customers. And then, no exaggeration, by the next morning, every customer car in your shop is messaging you. And nobody will directly say, well, I've seen you working on your car. Maybe they do. And when they do, you're like, yep, I was working on my own personal vehicle at 1 a.m. on Sunday night. I get it, right?
Yeah.
I've pushed to try to get everybody's car to make it, but at some point, it's a rough industry. You know what I mean? Where do you cross the line of this is my time versus shop time, right? he knows I'm going to be here from when I wake up until when I go to bed. So that means that at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm probably going to be here. So if I'm working on my own car at 1 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday night, I think I deserve that time.
Yeah.
Right? Well, a lot of people don't see it that way because you still have their car. So you owe them this work in this amount of time, even if you're on time, you know, and maybe, you know, if you do a lot of Mustang stuff, maybe they back off a little bit more than the Evo community or, you know, Honda guys, stuff like that. But, you know what it's like to be excited that your first turbo build is going to be done and it just needs tuning when it needs 6 months of labor. Yeah. You know, it needs 6 months of labor, a new engine, a wiring harness, and then tune, you know. So you get drawn into these and, oh, I'll have it done for you by the weekend, you know. Well, just because you've had to add 200 hours of labor to the car, they still think this weekend. You're like, oh, no. Sorry, but, you know, remember when we just added this like $5,000 worth of labor that's going to take time. Yeah. You know, so.
No, we hear that a lot.
Well, Justin talked about that too. He's like, you know, you kind of want a shop to take their time too.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. No car shows up dyno ready.
If you're in this kind of shit, you should just know that none of it turns around and quick. I get shocked when somebody's like not surprised that it's going to take 3-4 months to do something, especially if they're building a car sometimes from scratch. It's like, dude, your car's going to be gone for 2 years. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's just the reality of it.
And, you know, when people think about that, they're like, well, how long is it going to... You only charged me for this many hours. And you're like, yeah, well, then just, you know, how about we do this from now on? We start the stopwatch and you pay me like that. Yeah. Right? Well, I guarantee after 2 weeks, you're going to pull the towel. You know, you're going to throw the towel in. Yeah. Well, I don't understand. You know, I know you don't. That's why we just gave you a price on finishing it. You know, we're not going to go hourly. We're just going to quote you. This is what it's going to take to finish the car. Yep. You know, if XYZ, you know, like, how much does it cost to rebuild an Evo motor? Right? Well, whatever. It's going to be, you know, $9,700 if the crank and block and cylinder head are usable. Well, what if it's not? Add $1,700 for a billet crank, add whatever for a block, add whatever for a cylinder head, you know, and then you get it and you're like, oh, by the way, this thing was already punched out to max bore, has 3 sleeves in it that are all screwed up. Like, and you get it apart and you're like, well, you don't even have anything anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, like, and I can't even like put the stuff back together. You know, like, everything I understand changes. It drove on the way in, mm-hmm. right? But it's just this like pile of garbage, you know? So then, well, let's source a cylinder head. Oh, they don't make those anymore. You know, you know, we can get this Evo 7 head from overseas. It'll take a couple weeks, mm-hmm. you know, it's just, I mean, you get it, you know, it just, nothing goes the way you want it to. And then, you know, maybe they see their buddy who's an over preparer that has all these spare parts and had his ducks in a row, and his car comes in and you yank a motor out of it, and 3 days later they see him driving it again and they're like, well, why couldn't my car be like that? And you're like, you gotta go and spend like an extra $100,000, you know, like, you know, some of these guys have, you know, spare transmissions, spare transfer cases, spare motors, you know, and that's how they're able to, you know, recoup the car back so fast is that they really only need 20 hours of labor to fix this car. It doesn't need 6 months of waiting on parts and, oh, let me see if I can source this. Oh, you know, it's a Ford Barra engine and we're ordering stuff from Australia and they're on vacation for 30 days, you know, like, you know, it just depends what you're working on, you know, but yeah, I mean, a year on a full build, depending on what it is nothing, you know.
Do you even start a build until some parts are here? Because I know some people let everything be here first.
It really depends on what it is. A lot of our stuff will be, you know, like engine, wiring harness, turbo kit, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that, we'll say, or just a lot of engine work. So like Unfortunately, we're going to have to pull the motor out to see what we can salvage first. So basically, I like to quote, this is what it's going to take to remove the engine and get it torn down, and then we'll kind of have to recoup and build a price list after that. But this way we've locked in this. If we get it out, we get it apart, and you were thinking $6,000, but it's really going to be $15,000, then you owe me this, whatever, couple $1,000, and here it's all boxed and labeled. Have a nice day. You know?
Okay.
Or okay, we can save it, but we're gonna need this cylinder head, and or you want this billet cylinder head made overseas, so that's gonna take 6 months. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the motor, we're gonna hold on to the transmission and the drivetrain. You need to come and get this car. Right, you need to take this car home.
Yeah, free up the space.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when I've got this thing where it's motor, trans, turbo kit sitting next to it, and it's ready to go back in the car, hey, so-and-so, got everything all together, let's schedule for next week. We'll get the car back up here, and we'll go on to the next problem, right? Because maybe, yes, this thing blew up, and it was driving, right? But we've never actually seen this car run before. So we're going to put it all back together. We'll clean the injectors, and, we'll do our due diligence, but then now it runs. And, the turbo is smoking like a banshee, and, then you just open up the next can of worms of this project, It seems like if it's got one can of worms in it, it's got more than one can of worms in it. It's got a whole trunk full of them.
I do a lot of stuff myself, but as I've been busier, I've had to outsource a few things. And there's definitely been plenty of those phone calls where they're like, this is what we thought was going to go on. Then all of a sudden you see your phone ring and it's the shop and it's not the time your car should be done. You're like, fuck. And then you pick up the phone and he's like, hey man, by the way, you're going to need this oil cooler. You're going to need this. I tore this apart and this is fucked. He's like, we could just put a stock one back in it. Or, I always love the or, we could order you some new shiny shit, and that's going to cost you twice as much. And usually I'm like,
twice as much sounds
yeah,
good.
exactly.
I mean, it's just how it is. Or, I'll get, hey, can I make an appointment to have my injectors cleaned on my Evo? Yeah, no problem. I mean, you want to bring the car, or you just want to bring me the injectors? Oh, I was thinking the car. Okay, so you don't know how to work on cars. Yeah. That's fine. That's what we're here for. So yeah, go ahead and, next Wednesday at 5 p.m. you can drop the car off. And if everything's all good, you should be able to pick it up by 6 or 7 tonight. If they're really clogged, then maybe tomorrow afternoon, we'll have the car all set for you. And then, this is the Evo, and then a Subaru pulls in, ba 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 ba. It's basically some 3-cylinder Evo rolls up, and you walk outside, and you're like, oh, this thing blew up. Oh no, it just needs the injectors cleaned. And you're like, no, it doesn't. I can hear it. Shut it off, crank it back over. You hear one dead hole.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, all right. Let's just chase which cylinder it is real quick. All right. Okay, cylinder 1's dead. Let's see what's wrong with it, Let's grab the compression gauge. Yeah. Oh, it's the injector. Okay, we'll just grab the compression gauge. Brrr, 0. Okay, so yeah, it needs a motor,
Yeah.
And, all of a sudden the kid was signing up for a $150 job, and now all of a sudden he's signing up for a $15,000 job, and you're like, sorry, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but, we've seen even, a car go to a dealership and get a fuel injection cleaning where they pour like Napsol is what like that BG fuel treatment is. It's like a solvent. I think what you do is you like pour a bunch of this crap in there and you run it for a minute and then you go run it really hard, right? I don't think the ethanol sensor really knew what this stuff was. So it went on like the E100 map on kill and just like evacuated some exhaust valve and like broke the piston. And the dealer's like, oh, your car's all set, come get it. And the kid drives up, picks up his Evo, fires it up and calls me. You know, it doesn't really say anything besides he just needs the injectors cleaned.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, dude, I literally heard this and was like, who is here in a Subaru? And walked up to the window and looked out, and I'm like, oh no. And like booked it outside. Like, don't even shut it off. Like, this thing blew up, you know? Yeah. Oh no, it kind of sounded like my old Subaru. I'm like, oh God, yeah, this thing just blew up, dude. Come on, man. How far did you just drive it? Oh, 45 minutes. Wow. It's impressive. You know, it's really laggy, and yeah, it's a 3-cylinder, man. Like, you know, even like a bad 3-cylinder, not like, oh, the injector's unplugged 3-cylinder. Like, been pumping fuel into this thing, you know. So, you know,
they do sometimes go the other way. Like, you thought it was something horrible and it wasn't. Those are fewer and far between. But yeah, I bought a Fox body one time really cheap, and it was running like shit. And I don't know if you've been around as long as I have. You probably timed some old school twist distributor shit. Well, on the Fords, you had to pull this little tab, you know, in order to do it.
Yeah,
and they never fucking put it back in, and so it ran like shit. And I ran out to a Ford Tempo I had, pulled that fucker off and plugged it in, and it ran like a top.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not always that.
No,
that
so
way,
like
but it does happen.
I'll say this: I had one get towed in, and you know, he says, "Oh, it's got a ton of engine noise." You know, and I'm like, "Oh God, you know, it's gonna be block crank head. You know, it's just gonna be scrap. You know," and it shows up, and the tow truck driver starts this thing and backs it off the tow truck, and I'm like, come on, man, just roll it off, you know, like trying to like leave it running, like, where do you want me to park it? Like, come on, man, you're just killing this thing. And I like walk over and look in it, and I'm like, AC compressor is like sideways, you know, like the AC clutch is like sideways in this thing. And I'm like, I literally think this thing just like broke the AC compressor. I'm like, walk inside, grab a razor blade, slice the belt off of it, walk back outside, drive it in the shop. You know, I'm like, yes. Call the guy, hey, so about this engine. He's like, oh, what do you think? You know, I'm like, well, I got some good news for you. Yeah. You know, I got some bad news, but I got some good news. He's like, oh, what's the bad news? I'm like, AC compressors are kind of expensive for these cars. You know, okay. I'm like, good news is that's all that's wrong with the car. It needs AC compressor. You know, sucks because you know you just turned a $20,000 job into a $300 or $400 job. But hey, you know,
you don't want to take the dealer approach, man.
No. I didn't want to take the dirtbag approach. You know,
just warranty the whole drivetrain.
Yeah, it's gonna need a whole engine. You know,
yeah,
really needs an AC compressor. You know, so I mean, I've seen stuff like that, but for the most part, these things are DSM, so it just needs an engine.
Yeah,
that's just what it is. You know,
it's kind of good to get to something that breaks often, right?
Well, I mean, we don't work on Subarus, but yeah, I mean, that would be like the optimal like repeat customer. You know, is you know leave a Subaru on a stock ECU and just let somebody else remote tune the motor out of it all day long, and then you can just keep selling them to them, you know. But at some point, the customer will blame you for building the motor. So
the circle of life.
Oh, it is too. You know, like, you know, as long as you know you get the customer out there, and you know, if it's an Evo, we'll say whatever, you get it up making 40, 50 pounds of boost, and you let them drive it for a while, and then they eventually understand that it's theirs. Right, and that the factory warranted this thing to 200 horsepower, and it makes 800 horsepower now. That I'm not paying to fix that anymore. You know, like you got through break-in, we turned the boost up, we turned it way up. That's yours now. You know, this is no longer mine. You know, at the beginning, it's mine. You know, through break-in, lower power, that's my engine. Right, that I'm going to pay to repair. But once it gets past that point, I mean, just like, you know, a Coyote,
it's part of racing.
You know, even at, you know, we hit the dyno day one, this thing makes 2,385 and it makes 2,386 and breaks the rod in half. What do you want me to do? You know, I'm not paying for that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I get it both ways. You know, if we jumped in a, you know, a Subaru or Evo, Volkswagen, something like that, and, you know, we torque spike this thing at 3,500 RPM and snap a rod in half, like, it's probably my fault. You know, even if it kills the piston almost at any RPM, I look at that like I failed. You know, if it broke a stock piston or ring gap was too tight, something like that, you know, some freak anomaly, sure, that's not me. If it breaks a rod at low RPM, I feel like I failed. If it breaks the rod at 9,000 RPM, you didn't buy good enough parts.
Yeah.
You know, this is no longer my fault, you know. But there's certain instances where, you know, other local tuners or whatever, you know, when you're talking and, oh, this thing died today on the dyno. Where did it break at? Like at what RPM? Oh, it was like 4,500 RPM. And I'm like, that's your tuner.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Okay.
built motor, this, that, and the other, broke a rod at 4,500 RPM. That was the tuner's fault, you know. Or, you know, poor build, lost the wastegate line, something like that. Had a reasonable boost cut set up for 9,000 RPM, but made all that boost way down low at 4,500. I could see that.
Yeah.
You know, and if it melted off on the exhaust because customer, you know, I wouldn't want to pay to fix that, you know. But if I truly believe that I'm the reason that something got hurt, I'm going to do anything I can to try to help that customer.
Yeah.
You know, even if we're pushing it, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't suck. I just kind of failed them on that pull. You know, like I could have done this, that, you know, or, you know, I've had them run out of gas on the dyno and, you know, kick a head gasket or something, and you're like, oops. Sorry, you know, half the time the gas gauge doesn't work. How much fuel's in it? Oh, you're good. You know, okay.
Well, yeah, it's usually 9 times out of 10, once you start digging into shit, you can usually find the culprit. It's like forensic science at some point in time, right? Like when you said you found your cam caps all fucked up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't really know until you started digging into
No,
it.
I mean,
We thought we killed the trans.
when this
remember?
thing, yeah, when this thing broke, his built motor that was, you know,
Brand
two
new.
of my houses, you know, like this thing blew up, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, like it's getting late. It was kind of cold out. We're pulling this thing apart in the parking lot, and I'm like just waiting for him to like snap on me, you know, and like we're homies, but like, you know, I only known him for a couple years at this time, so
Yeah.
I'm like, you just never know when $30,000 gets involved at what somebody's gonna do about it, you know, like. You know, this kid, he could leave, you know, and tomorrow be bashing me all over the internet. And it's like,
Yeah, that happens.
I didn't fail you, dude. And you, like, try the best you can to, you know, scramble back together your relationship. And this person will just go and bash you to oblivion. And you're like, dude, I really don't want to do this. But, you know, here is the truth. I'm sorry you don't understand. You know, like, your cam broke in half and the gear fell off of it. That did not happen from my laptop. You know, but, you know, like, if you don't know, you don't know. And the person truly believes that you've screwed them over. And you're like, oh my God, like, I just need an educated customer.
Right.
You know, it's not.
Oh, is that not what kill map means?
Yeah,
Kill your own
exactly. You
shit?
know, like, I love to send it, you know, like, you know, my buddy was doing some Pikes Peak stuff, you know, and, you know, I send, you know, oh, it's way down on power. I'm like, I mean, at 8,000 feet elevation, I'm sure it is. You know, I'm like, I'll get after it harder. You know, I send them a tune-up and I label it, bring a trailer. You know? And I'm like, whatever you do, when you come back to Michigan or to less elevation, do not run that.
Yeah.
You know, and like just my theory behind it, right? I'm BMW engine, I'm pulling timing out of it because torque, right? I am trying to torque limit this motor so it doesn't dimensionally change itself. And well, it doesn't make any power up there. So why don't I just roll a bunch of timing back at it and I'll stick some boost in it and it just will make what it used to back here. You know, and I like call a couple people like, hey, does this sound about right to you? And they're like, well, it's just not going to make the same power out there. I'm like, yeah, but why not?
Yeah.
You know, why don't I just get after it a little bit more?
The air's less dense, just needs more air. Right?
Yeah, it just needs some more air, and it might have to spice the timing map up a little bit because I'm taking it away to save the rod. But now it's down 250 foot-pounds of torque. So why don't I just put some of it back in, you know, and dude calls me right back and he's like, oh yeah, it feels just like back home. And I'm like, all right, now I know that definitely don't run that when you come back home, you know. And you know, they call me back, hey, we got second. Sweet, dude. It's a lot better than it broke, you know. Like, right? You know, as the tuner, you're sitting there like, you know, he goes to an event that I can't make it to, and you're you know, got something to do in like an hour, but I'm still sitting there watching the live feed, you know, and something happens, you know, and you're like, oh no, did I fail? You know, call, nobody's picking up. What, you know, most racetracks, you got no service anyway. Right, so eventually you hear back from somebody that's at the track and they're like, oh no, the trans brake was unplugged, or this happened, or, you know, we ran it out of gas. We didn't turn the CO2 on. The nitrous bottle was empty, and you're like...
Or the classic Alex where you turn the boost past the boost cut.
Yeah.
Like at Roadkill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back when the truck was first on the standalone, basically Andy would turn it up to a certain point, and anything over a certain PSI, he would turn the laptop, and I would have to
and I'd just be like, here, you know, like...
That way you did it? And
like you know, so like, I don't want to like...
We go to Roadkill, I have like 48 pounds on scramble or something.
Yeah, so like, I come from import drag racing, right?
Yeah.
So like 85 pounds of boost is just fine, you know, like that's... I'm not scared of that. So like...
Yeah.
But this is your money, right? So like, sure, we'll stick another 20 pounds of boost in it, right? I'm not scared, but are you? Right? So like, here, I would highlight right here, I would enter this, I would highlight this section, I would interpolate this, and that's how I would do it, you know? Oh, okay, you know? Boom, does it, you know? Neither one of us are even thinking. He was going in to race the Swede, who had that Volvo, if you know what I'm talking about. Done some drag and drive stuff, and the thing's been like 6s or 5s or something in the quarter. You know, this is a bad girl. So he won Roadkill, what, 3-4 years in a row now or something?
Oh, shit. We got top 8 out of...
128 cars. He made it to like down to like the top 4 cars, you know.
Yeah, okay.
So we're going into semifinals, and I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, there's got to be 50 pounds on the scramble. You know, like, we just need to leave something kind of reasonable in there. We got to turn it up in the 60 foot.
We're racing the dude that wins every year. Like, he's had this car for I don't know how long. He used to dial
5-6 years. Yeah, he's got this thing working.
Yeah.
You know, it's got fuel tech on it, traction control, everything all worked out. So I'm like,
Volvo wagon,
you know, nice long wheelbase car.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, we're just gonna get after this thing, you know, and like, we're dead either way. Like, we'll probably weigh 2,000 pounds more than this thing, you know.
2,000 pounds more than anyone else in the finals.
Everyone else is... I'm like, make sure it's got like 48, 50 pounds on scramble. He's, oh, it does. Okay. Something's going to happen. And mind you, this thing's already missing a rocker. He cranks it over, and it's like, chit-chit, vroom, and as it fires, I hear it like, clank. And like, I kind of make a face, so he looks at me. And I'm like, trying to listen, and I'm like, it don't sound right no more. It's like a 7.5 cylinder, you know? And he's like, he like looks at me, and I'm like, oh, you're good. You know, so this is like a joke now that, oh, you're good. And like, now I have to be like, you're good, man. No, but for real, you're actually good. Yeah. You know, because like, I knew something was wrong, but we're like 30 feet away from pulling into the semis, like at a local at a local big event where more normal non-drag racers are out here watching this. So like, this is my business. Like, we got to get this thing out there, and you know, this is a crowd favorite. It's his truck. So I'm like, all right, you know, yep, it's good. You know, he pulls in. It's got all the boost in it. Leaves, makes it out, I don't know, 50 feet, and like jumps after the scramble. And mind you, we had to cut the bottom. This is the day we had to come back here and cut the bottom of the 4-link off. So it's dragging the 4-link in the concrete.
I hold the scramble, it squats its ass down and digs the 4-link bars into the cement of
just
the road.
Crushes the tire because this thing's heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still, you know, this was day 1 on drag radio. Like, one test hit on the street. And, yep, I don't know, we'll just leave that much air in it and try it tomorrow again.
Yeah.
Well, we get there and we're like, oh, wow, this is, like, sticky.
Roadkill,
you know? So we just keep turning
is,
it
right?
up.
Roadkill nights, they drag race on
I've
Woodward.
seen the event.
Okay,
I've not been here, but I've seen it on TV.
Yeah, we're, like, doing test hits here, well, at the legal track right around the corner, some private property. And we go pretty fast. And I'm happy with it. I'm like, we'll just keep it here. There's, like, no need to go any faster than that. Like, there ain't no way anyone else is going that fast.
Yeah.
On a radial, like on the street. Like, we're actually like not pouring a puddle. We're doing a burnout, popping it in 4 and leaving. And like, we go pretty fast for a radial in a 4,500 pound truck. And these guys rent an Airbnb. These random guys had an Airbnb across the street, random at the time. We're friends with them now. But they stopped by and they had this track hawk and they wanted to like race us on the street or whatever. And we showed them where the test spot was. So they go make some test hits. They were racing a different class, so we didn't care. And I told them what I ran over there, and he didn't want to race no more.
When they totally thought that we were like BSing them. So we get out there, and first lick, when I turn around, they're kind of all standing there. And they're like, you know, all hype, like, you guys aren't bullshitting, that thing's fast, you know? I'm like, dude, we told you, we weren't lying about what it went in the 8th. So when we get down to the semis, you know, he makes it out, I don't know, 50 feet, hammers at the scramble. Whop, bop, bop, bop. You know, this thing just bucks like 3 times and it's just over. You know, this Volvo is 250 cars in front of him, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to cry, you know? And I'm like, what came flying out of this car? And like,
you watch the slow-mo video, you can see chunks of cement getting
and
dug
so
out of the road.
Tyler with the Trackhawk.
Yeah, the guys that wanted to race us like 3 days or 2 days before, every round we went up, they were up there helping us.
Yeah.
Like,
so we're like standing there helping us get video and stuff. And like, we start kind of walking away and I'm like, I have to know what that was. And he's like, well, let's just walk back out there. And I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do it. You know, and we walk out there and I'm like, it's like chunks of concrete. And I'm like, still not fathoming where this came from yet until we like watch one of the videos in slow-mo and I'm like, oh. And then we watch a couple of the other videos and we're like, oh, this has been doing this all day. It's been like burying the bottom 4-link brackets on the axle housing. Or no, chassis side. Was it chassis side? It was chassis side.
Yeah, it was chassis side. Chassis
side 4-link brackets. So you had to like lop the bottom 2 holes right off of it. Because it just moves too much, you know, and obviously bouncing the 4-link off the ground isn't helping us, so
see ya.
Dice the bottom bowl holes off of it. So
and then we put the slicks back on.
So what do you do when it comes to like setup, right? Do you handle everything like A to Z when it comes to building a car, or do you collaborate with other shops, or what does that look like?
I guess depending on what it is, you know, so like, you know, I guess the Puerto Rican saying is yo solo, right? So
I got to get out there here soon too.
I will build a car, wire it. If it's my own car, I'll wire it, I'll paint it, I'll build the engine. I might do all the machine work on it, I'll tune it, and then I'll drive it. So like at no point, I don't do a lot of outsourcing.
Right.
You know, so I might go you know, and have somebody powder coat some parts for me or something like that. I've got a machinist that I refer to as the professor, that anything that we can't do, he definitely can, you know. So other than that, basically we keep 99% of it in-house.
Okay.
You know, and we've got some good friends, you know, that own other shops, so I won't say I'm not collaborating with somebody else, because I'll call another shop owner that I look at as my friend.
A lot of shops around here, they're like
and stuff.
all friends with each other.
Right.
It seems like.
So it's like that back home, and they do some collaborating, but I'm noticing it's happening way more often here. Like, you guys are hanging out at each other's shops and
Yeah.
Call each other,
build
ask for
shit.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so like, you know, we'll say like he mentioned before, the dyno over at Safes, right? So
Yeah.
Safe does a bunch of 2J stuff, right?
Okay.
And I'll build you a 2J, right? For sure. I'll do a 2J. He does a bunch of Haltech, right? I will tune a Haltech. It's not my favorite. So if we're online, you know, you look at the local forum and somebody says, hey, I've got a 2J on Haltech, who should I have tune it? And the first tag is Safe. And then 3 people tag me, and then 2 people more tag Safe. And then, of course, the customer is shopping.
Yeah.
So they message Safe, and then they message me looking for 2 different prices or availability, whatever it may be, you know. And I basically tell them, like, you should go to Safe. You know, you just said 2J and Haltech, right? This is both of his number ones, right? It's my number 6 engine, and it's around there for the ECU I would choose, right? So you shouldn't come to me, you know.
Right.
You should go to whoever wanted to do this job. They wanted to tune a Haltech 2J car, that's where you should go. You know, or you know, if you called me with a Mopar or something like that, I mean, you know, we're not going to beat ourselves over the head trying to learn how to work on a Hellcat or something like that. It's just not what we do,
Right.
you know. So there's enough variety, and there is plenty of business in the state of Michigan for all of us, you know. And, you know, whatever, I'm labeled as probably an import shop, right? And that's why we do a lot of import cars, you know. But we do this, you know, 3,000 horsepower LS car too, because he knows us, trusts us, and that we're not going to rob him blind. You know, we're going to do the work that we were paid for, and at the end of the day, you know, I'll at least help him get this up and running. And, you know, he's a tuner also, you know. He's done some tuning for the Big 3 and works for Borg Warner Turbo now. So, and he's, you know, very, very intelligent and wants all of the data. There is too much data coming out of this car for one person to basically handle.
There's
you know,
10
it's got
wide bands.
10 wide bands.
Holy shit.
You know, 80 GT. It's got, you know, pre and post temp sensors, and you know, there's just a lot there between, you know, shock travel data, you know, drive shaft speed, you know, all these EGTs and 10 wide bands. Like, you know, if you want to make some quick changes in between rounds, you know, you're going to look at a very small portion of that data, and you're gonna, let's get it back out there for next round in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, I'll still work with him after the fact, you know, like he's going to do some drag and drive stuff. So, you know, and maybe, you know, somebody else, you know, I've met a lot of people, they're comfortable tuning a car. They're very proficient at it. They're very good at it, but they've never turned something way up, you know. Going to turn a V8 up to 50 pounds or an import up to 100 PSI. And like, they're totally capable of it. They're just scared, you know?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm not, you know, and especially not remote, you know, because the emotion's gone. I can't see this thing. You want to hit this thing with a hundo? Let's do it. You know, we're going to do this in 4 hits too. We're going to go from like 10 pounds of boost to 100 pounds of boost in 4 pulls. I could do that for you. You know, this is just literally math, right?
Right.
So, we'll just say it's on gasoline. It's going to make 2 horsepower per pound an hour of gasoline, right? I mean, this is pretty simple to math out what 3,000 horsepower is going to be. So here's 3,000 horsepower worth of fuel. I fucking hope the motor makes it, because if not, this thing might hydrolock, you know what I mean? Like, wide open throttle stuff's pretty easy. So like, you can figure it out. But again, like most of us don't really try to poach off the next guy, like a lot of us have our own thing going, and same deal. Like, if, there's an Evo on Heltech that ends up over at Safe's place, hey, good for you, man, and, I doubt he will, but if he has any questions, I'd be more than happy to help. Or, if, there's some other, big racers that run Coyotes local, and a couple of them have reached out and, they'll talk to Alex, they'll talk to me and, hey, can we run some timing numbers by you? Yeah, for sure. Well, I got this much timing in it. I bet it blew the head gasket. Well, how do you know? And I'm like, I did that. I listened to those other Coyote tuners too at first, right?
Oh man.
They're just like, oh yeah, you just put 25 degrees in it everywhere and let the knock sensor pull it out. And I'm like, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
So like, we'll just start way down here at say 17 degrees of timing and we'll see what it wants. Well, lo and behold, it doesn't even want 17 degrees. It wants less, once you start really leaning on this thing. And I'm like, dude, what are these guys even doing? Yeah. And I can only imagine the dyno plot looks like this as the ECU tries to pull the timing out of it and stick it back in. So it's like, you're like, come on, guy. Even the torque converter couldn't smooth this out, like. But
yeah, that was crazy. And then trying to figure out the firing order of the F150 when we first did it.
Every big tuner in the Coyote world promised us.
There was a few that said otherwise.
There was one. There was people that knew it was different, but they were still wrong on what the firing order was.
Or they were scared. This was remember, this was back in.
This is whatever 21.
We put so the Gen 3 came out in 18. We put out a standalone in like what 20?
20 or 21.
So
and
like
nobody
no one
knew
had data on this stuff.
Yeah.
That the F-150 was different. So they kept feeding us a firing order, and I'm like, I mean, sure it runs, but on
and it keeps
6
changing
cylinders.
through the generations. Gen 1, the difference between the Mustang and the F-150. At one point, you only had to change out intake cams, and then it was like it was like a whole mess.
Well, they swapped the firing order because So what I heard from
in-cab vibration or something like that.
Yeah, what I heard from an engineer locally here is that in-cab vibrations from the Mustang firing order in the aluminum body. So they switched it back to old firing order to get rid of like the vibrations, I guess, is what I was told. But I ended up putting some painter's tape over all the spark plug holes without spark plugs and turning it over. And then just writing down which one popped in what order. Put a TEC and then turn it over.
So I've done.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways of finding it. Like, you just gotta go.
It's harder
old school,
than
right.
It's harder than most people think. So like, I did a Aston Martin that the firing order is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, no, it's not. But they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And the techs at Aston Martin don't know what it is because why do they need to? They just put the spark plug wires on where it tells them to. They don't even know what this means. So I'm talking to a buddy about it. Go grab 8 compression gauges and 8 balloons. Screw the compression gauge in, put a balloon on the top, and watch it sit there and fill up the balloons. And write down in what order do they fill up. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. So that's what I had done in the past was, I've got a bunch of compression gauge hoses that, I just screw in and we just hand crank a motor over and watch the balloons fill up. It's super easy to watch and, write it down. And I was just doing some 32 Ford hot rod with a 92 Ford Taurus show motor in it with like some waste spark, weird, like you're talking early Mustang ignition setup.
Yeah, the DuraSpark.
This was different. It had like that bip and pep or something like that. It's like The crank sensor and the cam sensor are both wired to the ignition control module and the ECU. So they're like 5-wire cam and crank sensor. And it's just a second signal shared, right? And it was messing with the ignition timing beyond belief, you know, and I finally got to the point where I'm like, I don't care, you have to listen to me. Here is a set of LS coils. You're going to go and wire these into the car, and then we're going to go drive it tomorrow, you know. And I've listened to this thing bang, pop, lock up the starter for like days. And I'm like, I'm not going to fix this. There is something else hardware related wrong on your car. And he wires up the LS coils, and it's still kind of it's running now, but I can tell it's still like not right, you know. And I'm like, I need to know the firing order. So we literally took his spare motor on the ground, put a timing belt back on it. We were trying to put our hands over the plug holes, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to get my compression gauge and balloon set up, roll this thing over, watch it, write it down real quick. And literally I wrote it down, boom, fired it in there, sync timing real quick, boom, fires up, idles. Cool, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm leaving. I'm totally done for the day at this point. I'm so pissed off.
Well, that's a weird one too, because that's a Yamaha motor.
It is.
Yeah, and
at the end of the day, everybody has tuned one of these things on a standalone ECU. No, they haven't. They don't even know the firing order.
No.
You know, like they just don't. And good point. Why do you need to know? You know, working at a dealership, you don't need to know. You just need to know that the spark plug wire from that back cylinder goes to this position on the coil, and that's all you need to know. You know, you don't actually need to know. So it's like getting stuck on that oddball stuff where, you know, you're just getting ran through the ringer, you know, and I mean, you build the best you can on it, you know, so.
I almost bought a Ford Probe that had a 90 show motor swapped in it, and they didn't have it running right yet, and I was like, I don't know if I want to get into that can of worms. And
it's a neat motor. It doesn't make any power like we remember back in horsepower is different nowadays.
I know.
So this thing is not cool, you know, like you're like, man, I remember those Taurus shows were kind of quick. They came in a 5-speed. They were kind of fast.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
No, I just broke up my 93 Cobra not that long ago to go to the podcast we were doing, and I'm like, it's just not the same. The Fox bodies don't have the same appeal to me as they did at one point in time.
Dude, I love that car, though. That was my first time seeing that car. That thing is, I like that.
It's a beautiful car.
I think it's cool.
It's all show.
Do you guys not live near each other or something?
He's about an hour away from me,
Okay.
So we just started filming. We're starting to do more of like a casual style podcast, get 4 buddies, shoot the shit, you know, get a little more fucked up than I should. And throw the cameras on, and we're doing that at his place now. We used to have a studio at Ratified Motorsport for about a year after my last co-host ditched us and went to California.
Okay.
So I needed a studio. But yeah, now we're back at his place, and I have some making up to do. So now I drive to his place instead of him driving to our studio an hour away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but no, it's like every time I see this guy, it's like, how many different properties do you have cars on now? I think we did the math on it. I think it was like 6 different fucking zip codes.
Technically 2 of them are in the same zip code. It's 3 properties, 2 pole sheds, and I have.
Don't you have something in a shop too? That
I
you
own 4 post lifts with cars stacked on them.
How many cars you got?
We'll be right back.
Yeah. I'd say like I have a lot of parts cars. You talked about your BMW. You said I had a lot of them because you had parts
like 10
cars.
or 11.
Yeah, so you're just like any other normal car guy. You gotta have a parts car, and you gotta a backup parts car, and then you gotta get the car that was a good deal. You had to get it because you needed this, and then So no, I have a lot of Fox body shit, but I have
at 12, it's called a collector.
Yeah, I'm over 12.
Yeah, all right.
I just was buying up Foxes and rare shit kind of when it was, you know, when I could get them for 10 to 15 grand a piece. 93 Cobras, I've got 4 of those.
Okay.
3 of those. Celine S351, Celine Cobra. I've got 2 OJ Broncos. I got a white 96 and a 95.
Did you bring that whole list on when you were on the show as a guest?
Yeah, I wrote down some shit. Yeah.
I think you missed like 1, but that was pretty much...
What I did is I wrote down the production numbers because I don't always know. Because some of the cars I have are like one of 7 or one of 12 or whatever, depending if you break down the color options and all that shit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, he did the Corvette owner thing. It's
Yeah.
one of
It's a
6 with a
101.
yellow seatbelt.
when
all
you're a car
101,
collector,
'cause
those
you'll-
numbers matter, right?
Yeah.
So I just picked
this
up a
one's
turbo
number
coupe.
750 something.
Yeah. Were these serial numbered too?
Yeah, it's oh man,
You haven't
I'm
even
gonna
talked
forget
about
now.
this thing.
I was about to bring
I
it
know.
back,
We're
yeah.
gonna get to that. Dude, did you see the
number
fucking
734.
LS swapped Lightning I sent?
734? That's a zip
734,
code from
yeah.
Detroit.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's
So-
pretty cool, actually.
Yeah,
No, I saw an LS swapped Lightning at the show today, and I was like, that truck needs to be parked right next to that fucker.
At what show?
At the
Auto show in Detroit.
Auto show.
Oh, okay.
That was our
Yeah.
first time
I
going
wonder
to
who that was.
It's a
I wonder who
black
owns-
car.
It was in the basement.
Yep.
Okay, I wonder who that is.
I went over to go look at it. I was like, ooh, Lightning. And then I was like, bleh.
As he was
Yeah.
doing the Ford stuff, I'm like, man, I always kind of liked the second gen Lightnings, whatever, 2099, whatever they
Yep.
are. You know, and I started looking, and I'm like, oh man, I remember when these things could. At a time, you could have found a rough one, $2,500,
Yep.
Yeah,
$3
they're
grand. They really weren't worth anything. Now, $2,500 gets you like half a shell, you
Yeah.
know, missing everything, you know. And I'm like, man, that would be kind of cool to 4-wheel drive swap one of those, put a Yodi in it, you know. And I'm
You'd
like,
be better off buying a short box, single cab. I think they were like a
Six-
F-150 Sport,
yeah, or
and you
like-
could still get them 4-wheel drive.
okay.
And then just Coyote swap that fucker. You'd be ahead of trying to build a Lightning and put 4-wheel drive in it.
I'm not scared to cut something.
Yeah,
so
I
like,
see
I'll
that.
whack a frame right in half. I'll put a half a 18 on the front, and you know, whatever. But like I said, I just always wanted one of these things. You know, just always.
Yeah.
Since my first car, I knew what these things were. Didn't actually know what they were, but knew enough that that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
You know, and they were just unobtainable. You know.
I'm pretty anti-GM, but the Cyclone, the Typhoon, and the Grand National they get me going.
Well, we saw you taking photos of that ZR1 today too. I got proof of that.
Yeah.
I mean, after working on them, the GM 6-cylinder, I'll say, leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
Whether it's the 4.3 or the 3.8, you know.
That 4.3 though, in like the NA form, like it was like that thing was pretty rock solid. If you just had like a S10 or something, that thing would like go forever.
And they were. And then you get to, like, when I owned a couple Typhoons, you know, they say it's tuning the glass engine. You know, it's got some hyper craptastic pistons in it on a stock rod on the, you know, stock Blazer camshaft. Like, there is nothing done to these things.
Yeah.
You know, they literally put like a low compression crappy piston in it, and that was it. That was a Cyclone, you know. And after tearing up a couple motors, I was like, oh my God, this thing is terrible, you know. Trying to buy, you could buy a set of 8 pistons for a small block Chevy cheaper than you could for a 6-cylinder. And then you can buy a small block rod, but it's too wide. Crank's narrower.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to narrow the big end of the rod. So you can machine the rods, and then you got 2 extra, you know.
Yeah, because
and
it's
still
just a
cheaper.
350 with 2 cylinders missing, kind of.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same bore size.
Yeah.
You know, but like, I mean, you get it, right? A 4-cylinder is a harmonic rattle trap. An inline 6-cylinder is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And a V6 is almost as bad as it gets, you know. And then, not knowing enough, I used to say a V8 usually torques itself to death, but that's only when it's massive, you know.
Right.
We just don't. That's, again, why the Coyote makes sense, because it's a smaller stroke engine, you know.
God's motor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I always joke when it comes to GM shit too, that even if they get rid of gas engines and all of them, you can't build them anymore and they start to die off, the last thing on the road will be like a late 90s Buick Park Avenue with a 3800 in it. Oh, yeah. It'll have like 482,000 miles on it. Still rocking the same
If those
oil.
like little plastic coolant 90s by the intake manifold don't break off and overheat the thing.
The coil packs would go bad all the time, but they were a fucking piece of cake because they were right on top. I was swapping out coil packs like all the time. Easy.
Did you have a supercharged 3800?
No, I had my grandma got her old Park Avenue, and it had like almost 300,000 miles on it when I got it, and I was a teenage boy. I beat the shit out of it. I used to go to stoplights and you'd gas and brake, and the suspension was so soft, the bumpers would be like bam, 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 bam. It was fucking great. It's still running somewhere, I bet.
You probably didn't even know me when there was that Buick parked in my side lot for
Sean's.
Yeah,
Sean's.
My buddy one day had a Buick Park Avenue. His grandma gave him. Yeah. And he's like, oh, my work wants me to get it out of their parking lot. And I'm like, why is it sitting up there? He's like, oh, it leaks gas. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, I got all the new lines for it. Can I just bring it over? And I'm like, yeah, that's all right. I'm talking about like 5 years go by with this thing sitting out back, you know, and finally the city was like, hey, guy. And I'm like, yeah, all right. You know, and I forget what we ended up doing. Just called a scrapper or something like that.
I thought Blaine took it for like...
Blaine did take it, and then they threw it through a demolition derby.
Oh, sweet.
And then he gave him the money when he scrapped it afterwards. So, got something back out of it, but...
So
well, anyway, what we were talking about here a second ago is you're planning on putting a Coyote in a Cyclone.
Oh, I mean, we're not planning. It's like a done deal.
It's in there right now.
Parts,
that fucker's sitting in there.
Well, I had some 2-speed 400 for it with a Chevy bell housing on it. And I bought some whatever JW or whatever.
JW bell adapter.
Yeah, JW bell housing for a Yodi. And them things are not cheap compared to a freaking small block Chevy. And I put the Chevy bell housing for sale the day I got the JW, and that bell housing sold literally in 30 seconds on Facebook, not even on Marketplace. I just posted it on my page, and 2 people showed up here like within 5 minutes. So the Chevy stuff is gone. So it's getting a Coyote. It doesn't like it in the front end very much. Yeah. But it's going to happen. So we're committed at this point.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've bought some Coyote parts, and like I say, it just kind of makes more sense in the end.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a much better cylinder head on it, and we'll say power per dollar. You know, obviously I understand what it would take to make, you know, 2,300 plus horsepower, and I know what that costs, and I don't know that I would get there with an LS at the same cost.
Yeah.
You know, being honest, like, it would be hard, you know. I get to rev it really high, so
it sounds like a F1 car ripping by.
Yeah, you know, this is more back to my roots, you know, you know, we spend most of this crap to, you know, 10,000, 10,500. So that's what makes sense to me. So we'll just kind of
double it.
Yeah, we'll just kind of stick
like
with
a double
it.
4G63.
We'll just do it the same way. You know, we'll put some valve springs in it. We'll leave a cylinder head damn near stock, and, you know, we don't have to go out there and buy some, you know, whatever, mast something, you know, $10,000 cylinder heads for it, you know, so.
Do you see yourself working on more Coyotes going forward then? Or do you want to stick with like what makes sense, a little bit older cars, not all the extra BS?
I don't mind working on a Coyote. I don't see myself working on a new Mustang.
Fair enough.
Right?
Okay.
So
like,
minus the car.
Minus
like
the
race
car,
car.
right? Like, I don't mind I'll build an engine for anything. You know, I'll do diesel work, whatever.
Okay.
You know, so like building an engine's no big deal. It's a air pump, and, you know, we need to sustain some tolerances here, and that's about it.
Yep.
You know, so the Motor I'm not scared of. I don't like to, even like the Evo, eventually why I bought my own Evo, right, was so that I can actually say, hey, this is what you should buy because I went and broke X, Y, and Z on my own car, and this is what actually works. And like I said before, just being honest, like, there is nothing left to make for an LS. Like as far as, some small accessories or billet parts or, obviously there's innovation all the time, but like you can just buy everything already.
Right.
And the Yodi is just a little bit newer. And I think as the cost comes down on what a used engine goes for, maybe when you start seeing like 2012 or 15, whatever, F-150s start showing up at pick and pulls and motors start costing $200 or $250, you might start seeing like a Coyote swap G-body or something, you see a Hellcat swap G-body in Michigan, there's a few of them. So
You think that's going to be kind of like the next Junkyard LS?
Probably not quite to that extent. It'll be it's
Higher-end
never
Junkyard.
going to be that cheap.
Right.
Like you're never just going to put a valve spring and some cams in it, but you might put an oil pump gear and some head studs in one of them.
Yeah.
I think
and make 1,000 horse out of it.
the main reason I don't think it'll ever get to the LS is they're not hard to work on, but I think they intimidate people with the 4 timing chains.
Yeah.
You can't go watch a YouTube video, pull ahead, throw a cam in it like an LS.
That makes
There's-
sense.
It's
4
really not
chains you
that
gotta-
difficult though. Like I've
They're
timed
not.
them.
No, they're
yeah.
simple, but I think it scares people.
Yeah.
There's like a higher barrier to entry kind of deal.
If you look at one with the timing chain cover off and like the valve covers off, you're like, holy fuck, there's no way. It's like it's got tensioners and shit.
Yeah,
It's
but so like if you've done like 350Z or this Volkswagen garbage, like eventually like it's just we're gonna put a timing chain on an engine.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just all there is to it. You've done enough BMW or, like even the new Supra motor BMW stuff, the B58, S58, like, once you realize that timing chain is on the back of the engine, and that it is terrible to get to, right? I mean, it's just a timing chain, it's not, I think a lot of people that could go and watch a YouTube video and put a timing chain on an LS probably shouldn't go and put a timing chain on a Coyote. You know what I mean? Like, but if you grew up doing Honda Civic B series and then we'll say graduated to K series and then did a 350Z and then you pop the cover off of a Coyote, like you're not even going to think twice. You're just going to be like, oh, how is it supposed to go? Okay. And bang it together because you've already worked on all of the worst stuff that there was to time, like 350Z is kind of crappy, same deal. It's got whatever 3 or 4 chains on it, so
That makes sense.
it's just not that bad.
Yeah.
So I would prefer a timing belt engine.
Okay.
Usually, most of the
Well,
time.
is the Gen 3 not a wet belt or is the?
That's only a 4.
It's a
Yeah,
4. Is
But that
okay.
wet
4
belt
is just for the oil
pump.
Just for the oil pump.
It's still a chain.
Okay.
It's still a chain to drive the crank to cam.
Okay.
But so like usually if you're looking for serviceability in the import world, you can usually get, say, the cylinder head off of the engine faster and put it back together faster if it's a belt motor.
Yeah.
Right, because you don't have some big sealed front cover and whatnot, K-Series Honda is pretty simple, and maybe that's just because I've done it so many times that, it's very easy to put a K-Series timing chain on or pull the cylinder head. Maybe not in 100% stock form, but at least something that's, built turbo, drag racing, whatever. It's pretty reasonable, but a belt motor to me, like we pull the cylinder head off my race car and, it takes like 13 or 15 minutes to pull the cylinder head. You know, and then you look at this Coyote.
I've done it countless times. What
I
last
know.
time was like a record of like
But so like, you
hours.
know, he'll like
Really?
drive up here after work and be like, yo, I'm like, yeah, you could pull it in and put a head gasket in it or pull the cylinder head to do whatever. And like, there's a 0% chance that he is driving this home tonight, you know, unless we wait until tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not getting done. You know, there is just so much stuff that you have to remove. Where again, yes, the LS is chain, but since it's push rod, you don't have to touch it in order to pull the cylinder head. So, you know, I mean, if you've done an LS cylinder head before, I'm assuming. You know,
No, I don't fuck with those things, but I've done plenty of 302, 351.
it's like
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
It's like that minus the distributor. You know what
Okay,
I mean?
okay.
Like, and it for some reason I feel like, well, because you don't have to like try to glue down the intake manifold to cover the valley. You know, on an LS, it has like a separate cover.
You need about 4 tubes of RTV.
Yeah. And then your distributor gear is in the wrong place, so it
Yeah.
keeps shearing off. Yeah, I had a big
But at
black
least
one.
it's in the front where I can fucking work on it.
I get it. But it's just, you know, it's what you know. And I mean, the LS, it is just easy to work on.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't really have to, you know, on stock rocker setup, you know, it's a torque spec. It's not really a lash. You know, you're not expecting some 16-year-old kid to go out there and adjust some freaking roller rocker or something. You know, like, that's why those things work for the average junkyard build. You know, it's a simple design for a V8. You know,
Yeah.
at least to work on. Ain't bad.
Well, it must have been easy because there's a million of them out there, man. They
Well,
put
they're
that fucker
cheap
and everything.
and so that's where I was going too. If a F-150, like, let's say, to make the Coyote more of like a junkyard build, if Mustangs would have had an aluminum block and trucks would have had an iron block, I think you would have seen a lot more out of it.
Yeah.
If that iron block, or if they didn't have spray welded cylinder walls, right? If they had a real cylinder wall in the Coyote, I think you would have seen a lot more people trying to like cheap these things together. You know, but since it's kind of not an option, you have to like commit a lot more to that engine than you do to build an LS, right? You know, you get a Junkyard 5.3 iron block, you know, with some He-Man thick cylinder wall in it, like, it is going to take a lot of horsepower, you know, where that stock Yodi spray welded cylinder wall just isn't going to do it, you know.
Yeah, but if your goal is just like 1,000 or whatever, you just
Put
want
stock,
to.
you could basically, you could junkyard either one of them together.
Yeah.
You know, you could put pick your poison. You could put a cam, some head studs, you know, and whatever, and turn the boost way up on an LS. Or, you
Just
know,
throw Yodi
you
in.
could throw Yodi in there.
Just
with some
barely
head-
breathe on it.
Yeah, you know, put some
Yeah.
oil pump gears and some head studs in it, and, you know, push it till the stock piston's about to die in it, you know, and they'll both do it, you know, so it could be done for cheap. Again, I think, again, people are just scared of it.
Yeah.
You know, like some hillbilly on the farm that can build a small block Chevy will put an LS in there and slap a carburetor on it and call it a day. He is not messing around with a Coyote,
No.
you know, and 4 timing chains and trying to figure out VVT, and, you know, he thinks that's some import thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I remember when I was buying up Fox bodies, I would get so many of them that would have carburetors put on, like the 80s ones that would have carburetors on them, even though they came with EFI. Because they were just like, it was too much for me to fucking figure out. I took all that shit off and just put a carburetor on it. I'm like, well, this is like a 92, so it didn't have all of that. But that's cool. Now I got to source all that shit. But thanks anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just what they knew how to work on.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's why, like, I don't want to say I don't venture out, right? But, like, Do I want to tune Alex's F150 on a stock ECU? No, I shouldn't, right? But I know that if I do it my way, that it's going to work, right? If I put this link ECU in it and I make it 12-1 crank teeth and I cut the cam down till it's got one tooth, this thing thinks that there's a freaking Honda Civic attached to it now, right? Like, it understands this cam and crank pattern. It is like, you know, the first cam and crank pattern since the beginning of EFI. You know, like, this is going to work. You know, if we bang some, you know, IGN 1A coils or LS Smart coils or anything on it, you know, because the stock Coyote coil seems like it's CDI, 2-wire.
Yeah. Oh,
you know? So, you know, we'll keep that interference out of the game, and we'll put a smart coil in it. You know, we'll use a normal Hall effect cam and crank sensor, and it's just going to work.
Yeah.
You know, as long as we can figure out what the firing order is, this is going to work. You know, we're not doing anything different than we've already done 2,000 times. So, like,
Block the DI off.
did I make you buy a couple extra parts to do it my way? Yeah, for sure. You know, could we have gotten the stock stuff to work? Maybe. Right? But was it worth it, right? You know, he's got turns of profit off some of these parts, but to, you know, make an initial cam and crank sensor or whatever, you know, you got $100 into some parts or whatever, or we sit here for another 10 hours pulling our hair out trying to figure out what in the hell is going on with the, you know, stock VR sensor.
Right.
So, at the time we couldn't even find a proper wiring diagram for it. And then even with this thing on the bench, waving it across a wrench or a fork or whatever, I can't get this thing to work. Well, I flipped the wires and flipped the wires and flipped the wires. Now, did I burn the sensor out? Well, probably not, but did I? Right? And I was just like, I'm done with this. We're just messing with it on the table. I'm like, I'm done with this. We're just putting a Hall sensor in this thing. It's just going to work. You know?
Keep it simple.
There you go.
Know it's going to work.
Did you want to touch on some of the billet stuff since we are close? I think we're past 3 hours now. I think.
I
right?
have no idea.
I have no idea what time it is.
I think.
I was going to ask you, like, because, like, I can talk. So,
Oh, dude,
like,
it's almost midnight.
Yeah.
Is it really? Oh, shit.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you want to touch on your stuff?
Holy shit, I have 100 notifications.
Well, sometimes you could get someone going. I'm like, I like listening to this guy. This is like smooth jazz. I'm just chilling over here.
I could have warned you about that.
No, it's good. I mean, people a lot of times they go into this going, I don't know what I'm going to talk about for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
3 hours
Dude,
later,
I'm
we're just,
so fucked, dude.
uh-oh.
What,
Yeah.
your girl?
No.
Like,
I gotta wake up in fucking 6 hours.
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Like, I was talking about, like, tuning classes, right? Like, my first tuning class, I, like, wrote all down how I was going to do this, and I had a whole bunch of notes. And then I walked up and, like, stood in front of everybody, and I'm like, oh, shit, I can't even talk. I'm like, I was about to start crying. I'm not even joking. I was about to cry in front of, like, a bunch of grown men, you know? And I'm like, and I finally literally just, like, put my head down and, like, looked at my laptop and was like, okay, so here's how you would go and start to unlock an ECU and blah, 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 blah. It's lunchtime.
Yep.
You know, and then, all right, I, like, stand back up after lunch, and I'm like, oh, shit, I'm kind of nervous again, you know? Start talking, boom, it's time to leave. You know, I'm, like, looking at everybody, they're, like, packing up their laptops, and I'm like, did I really make it through, like, 8 hours of this crap? And I look, and I'm like, oh, shit, we ran a half hour over already. You know? All right.
Well, I'll leave it up to you then. Do you want to touch on some of that stuff?
Yeah, let's
or
talk
do you
about,
want to wrap it up?
From
or?
all of these stories and all of this shit, the building Coyotes and having to tear shit back down to nothing and build it back up, you've kind of learned to have to make some of your own parts. So you've kind of started to turn a little bit of a business out of this. And
Yeah, so basically when we did the Gen 3...
It was the DI deletes.
Yeah, the DI deletes. So basically when we were putting this thing on a standalone, the Gen 3 was the first Coyote to have DI end port injection. So not many, if maybe now, but then there was no standalone that would control both port and DI. So I was like, well, it's basically the same as a Gen 2, just somehow get rid of the DI and run it just port only. So I took a bunch of CAD classes in high school, drew up some plugs based off of the DI measurements and source of seals, and just made some block off plugs. And then when I made them for my truck, I ended up having like an extra 10 or 15 sets made, and they sat on my desk for quite some time because I was scared to sell them. I was scared to post them for sale or say I had them and then just get like backlash from people saying, why are you doing this, or why is that? So I ended up just having a few extra sets and told a few people about it, and some other fast guys reached out to me, bought them, a big tuner bought them from me and ran them, and then a lot of people wanted them. So then I just started mass producing some of the parts. Basically, if I need the parts for my truck, instead of making one for my truck, I'll make like 10 or 15 and put them on the website. So I've just been starting to make a bunch of like CNC billet parts, from coil brackets, cam crank sensors, fuel rails. That's a Hemi air to water intake. Pull the blower off, put air to water if you want to turbo it. Bunch of other stuff that will be coming out hopefully shortly in the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Mainly Coyote and Hemi stuff.
Yeah.
No room for making money in the LS world.
Yeah.
It might sell, but you have to sell it for less than what you make it for.
Yeah, make a nickel on each one. Yeah.
If that, lose a nickel on each one.
Lose a nickel. Yeah.
It has to be so cheap that China outsources it to India.
Oh yeah, that happens too. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Like they say, shit flows downhill.
Yeah.
When there's no money left in China, they outsource it.
Yeah.
But so then you've also turned that into an actual business as well now, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's I started off as budget billet, and then I'm transferring it to AlloyWerx because the budget billet is when I was just doing the. I think when I first started that, I just had the DI plugs on there, and then
maybe the cam sensors.
Yeah, maybe the cam sensors. But I'm starting to build some and design some like really nice, like high quality pieces. And I don't want the budget billet name hurting me in the long run, you know?
Right.
So have a lot of really nice, basically just super nice parts coming out. You know, if you've seen the intake, the machine work on that, the fuel rails, DI plugs, if you've had them, the machine quality is awesome, and I don't want that name hurting me.
Yeah. There's nothing budget about it.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah.
So you basically said you took some CAD classes in high school, and that's what you're using for all this?
Yeah, so in high school, we had a really good like engineering program, you could say.
Okay.
So I took like 3 years of AutoCAD classes and learned in Inventor, and downloaded it again and brushed my skills up. But my teacher I had in high school was really good.
Okay.
He was awesome, so.
Are you still like, well, actually, a bit silly question, but what does kind of like continuing your education look like? Because I'm sure you're learning stuff every day as you're trying to grow an actual business out of it now too.
So a lot of YouTube videos.
The School of Hard Knocks now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
YouTube videos, design stuff. I mean, the software, the software, I don't think you'll ever learn every aspect.
Right.
I use Inventor. I don't think you'll ever learn every aspect of it. So like I'll learn little tricks and like shortcuts on designing things like almost every day, but like some things that I can't figure out how to draw or come to life. There's a couple guys on YouTube that I follow.
Anyone in particular?
I don't even know how you'd spell their names
Yeah.
because they're from overseas. I
Okay.
don't even think you have like somehow I found
You
the
don't have
video.
the button for
I
it.
don't think you have the button for it. I don't know how you would find them, but I don't know. A lot of it's just playing with the software, hundreds of hours in designing stuff. I think, I mean, crap, that intake probably, I don't know, 3 months of working on it, 4 hours a day.
Holy shit.
On and off, and
Yeah.
you know, so
Not the same design the whole time, right? Like
Right.
stuff, it was one design, then scrap the whole thing, then restart. Like it's not start with one and just progressively gets better. You'll get like almost done with it, and then you're like, shit, well, that's not going to work. Looks like I'm going to have to restart now.
Yeah.
No, that looks really cool, but it sticks 2 inches above the hood. That's not gonna fucking work.
Yeah. Well, shoot, then. I mean, do you want to pop the usual 3?
Yeah, I think
because this boy's got to get on Peasant Air tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, gotta go to Utah tomorrow.
So what's the usual 3?
All right. So at the end of every episode, we like to ask our guest to pick 3 cars. You have to give me a show car, a daily driver, and a track car. You have an unlimited budget. You can cut whatever you want up and weld it together, swap whatever you want.
You said a daily driver, a show car, and
track
a
car.
race car.
Yep.
Yeah. You didn't mess it up this time.
I didn't.
Would you say?
Almost.
And you say track car? I think we're road racing.
You can do whatever you want. Track, drag, strip,
car.
dirt, wherever the fuck you want
Sand.
to take it. Yeah.
Ooh. All right, so show car. I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to pick some like big dog twin turbo Lambo just so that we could show it off and get some gold diggers.
Yeah.
And then, for
Who would you go to for a twin turbo Lambo?
I'd have to do it myself so
All
that
right,
it didn't
fair
catch on
enough.
fire. And then if I was doing a track car, as much as I want a drag race, I want an LMP3 car that I could like drive on the street. So
Okay.
I think I might have to take that. And a daily, right? A daily?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ooh. Honestly, probably just like a Slam Denali dually HD on some semi wheels again.
Yeah.
Sold.
Just
Yeah.
that way, it's a big dog ride. It's huge, and then we can pull the other 2 with them too.
Yeah.
So we didn't throw the tow vehicle in there, so we're gonna make that be the tow vehicle.
That's.
daily.
I did mine a tow vehicle too, just because you gotta.
So what'd you choose?
My first time was a, because I've been asked a couple times. My first time was a Raptor R, and when I was a guest on the show, and then since then I've upgraded it to the Shelby Super Baja, the F250
Okay.
6.7 Power
Yep.
Stroke Shelby. It's such a badass truck.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got into the diesel game, and there's no looking back on that either.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
start backwards. I'm gonna start with the daily driver.
All right.
Dually 450 limited, for
All right.
sure.
Okay.
What was next? Track car?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ah, that's tough. That's tough.
All-wheel drive F150.
Something all-wheel drive. Yeah, probably all-wheel drive F150. It's just
Dude,
fun.
they're smoking, like, they're just fucking the whole world up right
They're
now.
the
these
American
F-150s.
GTR?
Yeah.
Whoever said that.
No, it's the Mexican GTR.
Mexican GTR. Yeah.
It'd
That's
be
right.
Or the Texas GTR.
Yeah.
a Texas GTR. No, I can't do something I already had.
Sure you can.
You can. People do it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess F-150, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, dude, some people have the same breakfast
I would
radius.
just have more money into it. It'd be full chassis.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah,
I'm
full
sold.
chassis. I'm halfway there. And then show vehicle. Man, that's tough too.
That's why I'm going to show off the Lambo.
Show off the Lambo. Oh,
For the
man.
gold diggers.
Dude, it'd have to be something ridiculous. I always do stuff that's ridiculous.
I always say we're not into sports around here. We're into girls and fast cars.
Yeah.
So.
That's really what everybody's doing it for, but you're the first one to just really admit it on camera.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
We're doing it for the horrors, not the gram.
Well,
Yeah.
just letting you know, my audience is 99.9% dudes.
Yeah,
So I don't know
get
if we're
it, I
winning
get
at
it.
that.
We've
point.
also
they
heard that, too. He's like, I
so
thought-
you guys understand.
Yeah, somebody's been like, I thought I was gonna get chicks with this car, and I just keep getting dudes.
Yeah. No kids, no wife, happy life. Right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh,
All right, where are we at
We
now?
bought
We're
you
at-
some time.
Show car, dude. I can't
Yeah.
even think about it.
Sure you can. Just go
I've
to
never
the
really
show.
like showed off a car before.
Is there something out there, muscle car, anything that really just?
Some resto mod or
like
something.
69 C10s.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
like Zach and Mackenzie's dad.
Dude, I think I could see you in that homie's new Impala.
Oh, that'd
with
be
the
sick.
fucking
Zach's-
blower out the hood.
Zach's Sexy Red, that red Impala.
Okay. That it?
That would be sick.
You guys probably got a good donk scene out here, right?
Not really.
No, oh,
No?
there is a donk scene. It's not good.
Fair enough.
There is a few nice cars, and I don't go to where they would be for
Yeah.
the most part. So like, we did a car show 2 winters ago down at Kobo, and there was a lot nicer donks than I ever would have expected. You know, like there's like a couple big block twin turbo cars that are not pieces of crap, right? Locally in Pontiac, there is a great number of donks, but I'm talking about like a 2 out of 10 on the paint scale and a 1 out of 10 on the build. You know, like
Just some rusted out Monte Carlo.
some clapped
on
out
fucking
305 in it,
Yeah.
or at best like
an
the world
86 Caprice Classic.
the world's worst 5.3 swap in it,
Yeah.
that's like already caught on fire 3 times. And, yeah, just not nice cars.
Well, sweet. On that note, where can everybody find you guys? Do you want to be found?
You can find him all over the internet. I kind of exist, but
You're a referrals only kind of guy.
No, I mean, I have a page that I don't really do much on, and, I got a couple buddies trying to push me to do some YouTube stuff, but again, I work.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, this shop is exactly like,
Need for Speed.
no, oh, I guess that one scene, yeah, I suppose.
I've
when they
never
were-
even seen this movie.
Yeah. Well, no, it's like after, like, before Fast and Furious went to hell, sort of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Well, then what's your handles then?
Basically, Instagram, TikTok is just, not TikTok anymore.
You
You
got
a
6
week-
days.
You got a week
I got
left.
a week. I got a week left. Facebook and Instagram is just Alex Chud.
Okay.
And then TikTok is my F150. The license plate's work truck. WRKTROK.
Okay.
So that's TikTok, and then everything else is just Alex Chud.
Okay. And for
And
you,
then-
people find you at A-Star Fab?
No, I mean, basically, if you want to see me actually post something, it's just under my personal name, Andy McPherson.
Okay.
So I think I'm like Andy McPherson 925 or something like that on Instagram, and
Fair enough.
Andy McPherson on
Andy was fighting the
Facebook.
GoPro earlier. He's not good with the
Oh no, it was
technology.
a DJI something or other. I was about to smash, but we finally got it working. So, unlucky for some of you, you might actually have to see me again online somewhere. So,
Did I cut you off there? Or
No.
Okay,
no.
just making sure. Just make sure.
No,
All right,
you're
cool.
good.
Well, on that note, Andy, Judd, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Super fun. Dan, thanks for existing, and we'll see y'all next time.
thanks for having us.
Thank you.